We got share. Yeah, share. Oh, that is.
Red. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got the committee here. We've got Sherry Sylvester's online. I see you as an icon in the upper right-hand corner of the monitor.
I'm here. Thank you, guys.
No, yeah. We're at a first-class university here in the state of Texas. I'd like Charles Wright, the director of the 1836 project, to call roll.
Cindy Laura,
Here.
Jerry Patterson. Here. Dr. Carolyn Crim,
Here.
Dr. Frazier,
Here.
Dr. Mac Woodward,
Here.
Brandon Creighton, Senator Brandon Creighton, and Jerry Sylvester,
Here.
Robert Edison.
All right, so we have 6 people in attendance, and we have a quorum for any business and voting that needs to take place. I will gavel us into order. And this is the meeting of the 1836 Project Advisory Committee. First thing we have to talk about is I want to welcome all the people that have come to provide testimony today. We have an all-star team of Texas historic sites in the room. I mean, I'm amazed at the talent that is in this room right now. We've got, well, first of all, our host is the Sam Houston Memorial Museum and Presidential Library. Did I get that right, man?
You got it.
And,
Texas president.
oh, yeah, he's everybody's president in this room, so. Yeah, I get that. All right, so our host for this is Derek Birdsell. He's in the back, and he'll be speaking to us here in a second. Appreciate your kind hospitality and the great tour that you gave everybody. Also in attendance, we have Carolyn Spears, who's the executive director of the Old Stone Fort at Stephen F. Austin State University, just a little ways down the road. Another important Texas Revolution site and colonial Texas site. Amy Rogers is here from the San Jacinto Museum and the battlefield. And what a great, great location that is, great site. Brian McCauley's got the, still has that smell of newly sawn lumber at his site at the San Felipe de Austin Historic Site, one of the newest additions to the constellation of great Texas historic sites. Adrian Barker from the Historic George Ranch Association is with us as well. She'll be speaking to us about things going on down the coastal bend. Scott McMahon from Presidio La Bahia is here. He's been a stalwart. Well, he's been down there a long time. He's kind of synonymous with the site and one of the really fascinating and best preserved sites in the state. And then we got Jonathan Failer. And Jonathan Failer's here from the Washington on the Brazos Historic Site and the Star of the Republic Museum, which is undergoing a rather major facelift since it was the birthplace of Texas independence. It's probably about time. So that's everybody in the room with us today. And as far as my opening remarks, we're making great progress. Charles Wright has been tasked with a number of things to accomplish with the 1836 project. And one of the things that I directed him to investigate is essentially start thinking about what I would call a cultural, heritage and cultural inventory in the state of Texas. Who's doing what? And what part of the Texas story are they telling? How can we facilitate some of that? How can we get everybody talking to each other? And I can tell you that Charles has taken that charge very, very seriously. He is going to outline some of the his recommendations for how to facilitate that. I've also been very keenly interested in the piece of legislation that speaks specifically to the gubernatorial's award on Texas history. it was not particularly, the edges were not particularly crisp in the legislation. So we're now defining what that looks like, and I think we have some parameters we're about to hear about. So those are the big pushes right now. Charles has also discovered some other targets of opportunity. And so what I think I would like to do now is have Charles come up and talk about some of the things that he's been working on and some of the things that will be upcoming business for our committee when we meet tentatively now in January, January 9th in Austin. I think will be our next meeting. So this is going to be introducing the ideas, and then in January, we'll get to actually lean into them and decide which direction to go on it. So Charles, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear your briefing.
So anyway, so you've seen all the things.
You need
I've
to
sent you.
push. the
Press button for red. There you
There
go.
we go. You've seen all the things that I've sent you in the executive summary this past week. It has been a busy 3 months since we last met in Canyon. Dr. Frazier has definitely given me a few things to take care of. If you'll notice, one of those was looking at the DMV and seeing how the pamphlet was being used and passed out. As you can see, it's a mixed bag. I think one that you could tell was some were the letter of the law and some were fulfilling the spirit of the law in that. So that's something that we will look at further. The other is I presented to you a guideline, just a rough draft of what the gubernatorial award could look like. And so one of my ideas is to have a subcommittee, just 2 or 3 of us, to get together and finalize to put before the committee, whether it's in January or the 3 months after that. That was one of them. The other that I'm looking at is creating a collaborative that works, because kind of what we've had today with all these different people here is basically a collaborative. And I want us to see how we can help each other out. And instead of going against each other, how can we work together to move Texas history forward and all the new people that are moving into the state, since it is being flooded in with thousands all the time. So that was one. And then there's a film project that's come up. I mentioned that in there. I'll have a lot more information for that in January when we're here. Not here, we're in Austin that one. That's right, when we're there. And so when the film project, I'll discuss in way more detail, because I'll have a lot more to give to you and show you to that. That kind of landed in my lap around the end of July. And I was kind of surprised at what was happening, what was going on. And so I'd like to kind of move forward with that. Bob Phillips had given me a phone call from Texas Country Reporter. He'd gotten my name from somebody else who was a producer. And all of a sudden talks started happening, and who knows, but we're going to at least discuss it and see where it kind of goes from there. So do you have any questions for me?
Any questions from the committee?
Just to comment that, thank you for your summary. It was very good.
Thank you,
I
sir.
appreciate that, and let us know all that you're doing and what's going on. We appreciate that.
I will constantly. And I want to thank all these people for coming today. I appreciate every one of you, and especially those that I've come and visited so far. And several of you I plan on coming to visit. I hope you'll have me. And it's exciting to get to go along. Your job is to go and to visit Texas historical sites and to talk to people and see things with Derek alone in the vault, like y'all got to see. That blew my mind when I came here about a month ago. So we're pretty excited about what's going on. Thank you.
Let me, before you leave, just so you can give some clarification, we were talking about the DPS office, and just to contextualize that for people that aren't aware of what that's about. A key part of our legislative mandate was to create a concise telling of the story of Texas and to produce it as what was described as a pamphlet. And then it would be distributed through driver's license offices across the entire state of Texas. So I asked Charles to do an investigation on whether or not that's actually happening. Because it's one thing to have it written in the law that happened, but it's another thing entirely to see that it gets done. And I had people saying, look, I went looking for it, couldn't find it. Other people said, yeah, I went looking for it and they handed it to me happily. And other people said I went looking forward to it or looking for it. And they pointed me to an open box over in the corner, said, take one if you want it. And so, on top of that, we've got other issues with that, with the pamphlet, because it's really more of a booklet than a pamphlet. So we're investigating on whether or not it could be reformatted to actually be in a tourist center, rack, brochure rack, something that's a little handier, fits in the back pocket. Anyhow, so we're investigating, kind of looping back around to figure out about that story that we all collaboratively wrote. And it's an important tool for people to use when they're trying to get a quick study on the story of Texas. So we're trying to figure out how to get that more effectively deployed. And so that's that piece that Charles was talking about there. Beyond that, any other questions? Sherry, you got anything for him?
No, sir, I'm good. Thanks.
All right. So thank you for that, Charles. And we will move on to the next item on our agenda. So we're going to, with that executive summary in place and the highlight reel that we just got, it's about circling back on the brochure. It's about figuring out a cooperative with all of the different heritage and cultural tourism venues in the state, and also to figure out what the governor's award is. We got a lot of things to talk about. And then there's this potential television project that came up. So it's kind of Bob Phillips meets Texas history, the way I understand it. A little less bucket list and a little more, let's go out to Goliad, or let's go over to San Felipe or to George Ranch or some of y'all sites and really do something to popularize those with the traveling traveling public, but also educators. So there's some exciting stuff, but we're not in a position to do anything about it now other than to get the idea in y'all's heads. So we're looking at the meeting in January where we can actually provide Charles some direction on these various initiatives, because they'll be a little more fully built out by then. All right, so that's the committee business, or just a warning order that the committee has business. So that said, we'll move on to our invited guests who have burned the better part of their day to come up here and tell us about their sites and what they're doing and how we can help them and how they can help us. And remember, the operating orders here are, we're really interested in telling the story of Texas. And y'all are the great practitioners of telling that story, each in your own chapter. 49% of the people living in the state of Texas are not from Texas. They didn't go to Coach Pringle's 7th grade Texas history class. So sometimes the first exposure they get to the story of Texas is at y'all's sites. So I'm really excited that we have the talent pool in the room right now that we do, and applaud y'all's efforts. And I know what it's like to manage a facility that's open to the public and has a lot of roofs. I can tell you from my own brief foray into museuming, there's a lot of artifacts, and there's always something eating something at your site. And it may be a cat, it may be a saddle, it may be timbers holding up a 150-year-old roof. So I appreciate you guys taking the effort to come up and give us a briefing. I'm going to call our host up first, Derek Birdsell, to tell us about what's going on at this really fine museum, at this really fine university, in this really fine city. Dead center. When it turns
Red button, right? We're
red
good?
button.
Well, first I'd like to thank all of y'all for giving me the opportunity to show off our spot here. This little slice of heaven. And I firmly believe I have the best job on the university campus, getting to work here at the museum and telling the story of Sam Houston. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to show off what we have. And I hope you enjoyed your visit out on the grounds and into the museum. A little background, I'm the director here, have been for the last 3 years, which is hard for me to imagine, Mac. It seems like yesterday that Mac retired. Prior to that, I served as curator of education here. Before that, I worked for 18 years as superintendent of the Farmers Branch Historical Park. And then I started off my 30-year museum career here at this museum as a broke graduate student when a position for museum guide, which is what our interpreters were called at that time, but a museum guide position came up. I think I made a whopping $12,000 a year. And as a broke graduate student, that was, that was $1 million. But that decision really changed the course of my life. And I don't know that over the 30 years in the interim there that I would have changed anything by that. But I worked as a guide. Mac may remember, I think this is around the time you started, where the university did one of its constant series of evaluations over what its employees are called. And I went from being a museum guide to a historical interpreter. And that came with like a $3,000 or $4,000 pay raise. And I was just in absolute heaven. I was like, this is great. But I became the curator of education shortly after that. And then, as mentioned, moved up to Farmers Branch. I do have the best job on the university campus. I get to meet with the university president, and every time I get to talk with her, I'm like, I have the best job here. She's like, I think you're right, really. But I have the pleasure of working with 14 amazing, dedicated, and very passionate staff that are like on a permanent level. And then I have on any given semester, about 10 student workers who help fill us in, working the front desk, working in the museum store, and that sort of thing. Our site was the home of Sam and Margaret Houston, 7 of their 8 kids, the slaves owned by Sam Houston for about 11 years in the 1840s and 1850s. We have about 15 acres left of the original 235 acres here in Huntsville. Essentially, the area across the street from this building used to be the Houston's property. If we put it in today's terms, I think we'd call it more of like a hobby farm than any attempt at really making any money. I don't have any evidence that the Houstons made money on their property here, and I have plenty of evidence that they lost money on this property. So I think calling this a hobby farm is a good estimate of what it would be in today's world. And also, remember, Houston's a politician. It doesn't look bad for a politician in the 1850s to say, I live in a log cabin. I'm one of you. And I do think Houston took advantage of that. The Woodland Home and the law office are original to this site. The Steamboat House where Houston died is from across town, was moved here in 1936 as part of the centennial celebration. Several other historic Walker County and Montgomery County cabins have been moved in over time as well. Depending on whose date you would like to use, you can trace the start of the museum to either 1904, 1911, or 1936. Just depends on which one of those areas you wanted to call was the beginning. But certainly by 1936, the site was dedicated to the public as the Sam Houston Memorial Museum, with construction completed the following year in 1937. So for those of you that can still remember our tour from a minute ago, the area we started, that central room, that's the oldest part of the museum. In 2017, the museum was designated by the state legislature to also be the Republic of Texas Presidential Library, owing to Houston's 2 terms as president of Texas. We are a department of Sam Houston State University, and we receive funding through the legislative process. We do also do some fundraising on our own. This building is used for rentals, for example, and provides us with a nice little extra stream of revenue to fix air conditioners and leaks in the roof and that kind of thing, which, as Dr. Frazier pointed out, it's part of the deal. Annual visitation is about 70,000 people a year. Ranges from organized school tours and adult groups to family vacationers, history buffs, and students from the university seeking a quiet place to study. And I think some of them actually are studying, but there are other activities the students do that we could talk about after the meeting. We tell the story of Houston via in-person, virtual tours, special programs, exhibits, and robust online presence with Instagram and Facebook primarily, and still trying to sort out how X/Twitter works anymore. Primarily, we use third-person interpretation with our visitors, often dressed in period clothing, and intermixing historical demonstrations like in our blacksmith shop or our outdoor kitchen. And if I can do a little aside, I have to point out, the benefit of having a 30-year career is I can remember when we started interpreting and doing living history, was a thing. And I know some of these guys, I won't mention their names, started around the same time. But, Cody Mobley, who some of these gentlemen will know, he called it a frontier hobo outfit. So blue jeans, a pioneer shirt, a cowboy hat, and modern boots. That's how people dressed in costume when I started this gig a million years ago. And it has been extremely rewarding to see the amount of detail and dedication that goes into, just talk to Scott about, the stitching or the fabric or the buttons, the minute detail that goes into properly representing our past. And there has been a substantial change over the course of the last 3 decades, and I think a change for the positive. We do dabble a little bit in first-person interpretation, but not very much. I think if you want first-person interpretation to work properly, you have to be at a site like Mr. Failer's, where you're out in the woods and nobody's, you don't have college kids jamming out their tunes or doing burnouts in front of the museum. Nothing quite like portraying Sam Houston when you have a burnout of a motorcycle out in the driveway, and what would Sam Houston say about that? So primarily, again, we do third person with a little bit of first person when we can sneak it in. As I mentioned on our tour, our interpretation's based on as much primary source documentation as we have, and we have a lot. We have quite so much documentation that's hard to keep up with it, to be honest. But we do base our interpretation on those primary documents as much as we can manage. And as you've seen, we have an impressive amount of both personal and political correspondence from Houston. I've had the pleasure of working closely with most of the other speakers you've invited today to teach Texas history, either here at our site when they send their staff here, or at their site when I'll send staff to their sites. And it's been absolutely another amazing thing over the last 30 years. When I started in this business, each site is very much its own silo. And there was very much we were competitors with Washington on the Brazos or San Jacinto, versus today where we work much more cooperatively. And we're all on the same team. We're all telling that Texas history story. And it has been very rewarding to see how well we all do work together. And y'all can't challenge that when you get up here and talk. On a personal level, it's extremely rewarding to be able to see places where Houston spent time. Even though that today I spend most of my time dealing with budget and staff and holes in the roof and why the air conditioner doesn't work again, and we have a big meeting in that building tomorrow, I still like to play a historian on occasion. And being able to go to sites where we know Sam Houston was helps me to tell Sam Houston's story. And it is rewarding to visit the other sites that we have here today with us. As I mentioned in the museum, Houston and the Alabama Coushatta had a close relationship, and we maintain that today. Sam told the tribe that as long as he lived here, they were welcome here. And I've told the tribe, as long as I'm the director here, you're welcome here. They do their part to try to teach me Alabama Coushatta words, and I try not to butcher them too bad. But I do believe that also helps me to get closer to Sam Houston, because Sam, I believe, was very multilingual. He could speak Latin, English, Spanish, I suspect French, I suspect German. We know he communicated with various native tribes. So every bit of their language that they teach me helps me to learn more about Sam Houston. I firmly believe that history is important. Without history, history is the tie that binds all of us together. And too often it's used as something to separate people, from one group or another. But it's the tie that binds us. It's why we're here. When you just look at, I read something recently where it talked about when you look at like the math on what are the odds that everybody in this room is here together at this time. You know, when you go back to your grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and great-great-great-grandparents, the number of people involved in the equation for us to be here is exponential. It's huge. And that's just our personal history, not like state history. So history is important, and it should be the tie that binds us all together. And that's the good part of history and the bad part of history and the ugly part and the part that tastes good and the part that smells. But it's why we're all here together. And whether you like Sam Houston or not, and I will tell people when I give tours and talk to different groups, it's like, I really don't care if you like Sam or not. I don't care. It's not my job to make you like Sam Houston. And if you don't like Sam Houston, that's fine. I don't care. But whether you like him or not, you have to recognize that without Houston, we wouldn't be in this room, right? I mean, at the very least, we wouldn't have a place to meet today, right? On a larger scale, if Sam Houston did what the Texas government wanted him to do during the revolution and turned and fought Santa Anna's army somewhere on the Brazos River, they'd have been defeated and there wouldn't be a Texas. And if Texas didn't soon thereafter, you know, a decade later, join the United States, there's not going to be a Mexican War in 1848. There's no, you know, if there's no Mexican War, when California becomes part of the United States after the war, and that gold gets discovered in California, and that gold goes to Mexico and not Washington. You know, is there a Great White Fleet with Teddy Roosevelt, turn of the century? Does America become a preeminent power at the end of World War I? And if America doesn't enter World War I, you know, Germany wins that war. And if Germany wins, there's no interwar period where Adolf Hitler becomes power, you know, when he comes to power. So, you know, again, whether you like Sam Houston or not, if you want to play the how the dominoes fell, he changed the world. And I do believe that it behooves us to recognize that. All of that said and done, I'm well aware, based on research shared by Colleen Dillenschneider, people place a higher degree of confidence on information they receive from museums than any other source. Books, media, TV, social media. People trust museums. And it's on us to make sure that the story we tell is true as best as we can manage. It is vital that we take the responsibility seriously. We are in nearly a constant state of evaluation of the stories that we communicate through our interpretation and the things that we have on display, that I feel a reasonable degree of confidence that that was Sam Houston's whatever. That was his vest, that was his pistol, this is the story. Because people trust us, and that trust, you know, you don't want to waste that trust. We constantly are looking at, where do these stories come from? You know, where did it come? Where do you get it from? And unfortunately, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, a lot of this is from this document, this is from that. And we have gone through and started cleaning those up. Mac probably remembers when we both started here a million years ago, we were handed, here's your script. Memorize this, which is a horrible way to give interpretation if you ask me, but there's nothing better than, hi, my name is blank, fill in the, or we are in the blank, welcome to the blank. It's horrible. It's a horrible way to give tours. But in that information were several quote unquote truths that bore little to no resemblance to historical fact. Somebody thought at some point this would be a cute story. And one of those that comes to mind, and people still bring it up today, is that the doorways in the Woodland home are short because Nancy Lee, who was Sam's mother-in-law, wanted Sam to show deference to his wife, her daughter, home, and that the doorways were short since he was a tall guy, that he would have to take off his hat and bow when he came inside the room to show deference to her daughter. It's a cute story, but it's total rubbish. You know, the doorways are short because of physics. You know, if you make the door too tall, you weaken the ability of the walls to support the weight of the roof, and your building's going to collapse. Has nothing to do with Nancy Lee wanting Sam Houston to bow to her daughter when he came home. But that story was told so many times that when we quit telling that story, that I would give tours and people are like, did you just start here? You don't know these stories that we've heard. And I'm like, well, actually, but separating that myth from the reality is certainly one of the challenges, but it is on us to accept that challenge and do it. The one other little story I'll tell you was cute. If you noted the chamber pot in the main museum across from our new executive mansion, when that chamber pot was donated to the museum in the 1930s, it was donated not as Santa Anna's chamber pot, but as Santa Anna's soup tureen. Because the Houston descendant that had it was a little embarrassed that he had Santa Anna's potty, and he had another handle welded onto the chamber pot. So it makes me laugh from about 1937 to probably 1997, how many thousands of children came to visit the museum thinking they were looking at Sam Houston or Santa Anna's Super Bowl, only to discover it's the other end of that process. But I remember when Mac kind of was like, that's not a Super Bowl, it's a chamber pot. But this brings us to the crux of the matter. I believe one of our main jobs is to separate the myth of Houston from the reality of Houston. And it is a big and constant challenge. Houston is a much larger than life figure. He was polarizing in the 19th century, just as he's polarizing today. And that power of mythology is strong. All we can do is rely on the documentation that we have and tell the complete story as best we can without editorializing about it. It's not my job. Now, if we're sitting around the campfire having a beer, sure. But if I'm at work, it's not my job. And it's our job to tell that story, the good along with the bad, because you can't have one without the other. You know, we spent a good deal of time in the 1930s and 40s making Sam Houston to be the white knight on the big horse coming to save the day. And then we started spending time around 2000 or so saying Houston was horrible because he was a drunk and he owned slaves. They're all the same person, and you can't just focus on one or the other. And I don't believe that it denigrates the memory of Houston to talk about the bad along with the good. It makes Houston relatable to human beings because, you know, not to point fingers at anyone in this room, none of us are perfect. We all have our issues, and Houston had a lot of issues. And to me, that makes Houston very much more relatable than someone who was perfect and never made a mistake. Moving forward, we'll continue to try and make Houston relatable to a 21st century audience that's wrapped up into quick sound bites and reels on Instagram, because I do believe there are things we can still learn from Houston today. And with that, thank you for your time. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And we have any questions? Yeah, very nicely done. I liked your comment about you got to be honest.
Got to be.
Yeah, you got to tell honest history, good, bad, and otherwise. Any questions from the committee? Sherry, you got anything to throw in?
I'm good, thank you. Great presentation.
I just because I know that in telling the story, I really like the point that you made about cooperating with other sites and other museums. But in the community, there's a lot going on and a lot of cooperation
Correct.
within the community to tell that story too. You know, Huntsville would not be Huntsville
Correct.
without Sam Houston. We'd be a blinking light.
Correct. We'd
Yeah.
be Madisonville on I-45 with a Buc-ee's, and that's about it.
That's about it. Yeah. But anyway, talk a little bit about the
Sure.
cooperation within the community.
Sure thing. So in Huntsville itself, the city of Huntsville struggles to how it wants to identify itself. You know, at one time it was Prison City. You know, there are multiple prisons in and around Huntsville. And at some point in the recent, the last 15 years, 20 years, Mac, maybe, the city has really moved to the home of Sam Houston rather than Prison City. And without Houston's influence, Huntsville wouldn't be like it is today. There wouldn't be a university across the street. Most likely the prisons wouldn't be here as well. But in addition to, you know, living here on two separate times in Houston's life, Houston's buried here. And where Houston's grave is, we're working with a group of folks who are attempting to beautify that area. For those of you that have been there, it literally is like right next to the road. You park your car in the no parking zone, Mac, and hop up on the sidewalk, and then there's Houston's grave. And I do believe that, being able to beautify that and make that more of a destination than it is right now would be great, both for the community as well as for us to help tell Houston's story. So, yes, ma'am.
I'd like to comment on the history that several of the old families from this town have contributed to. And I think Mac Woodward is to be commended for his support of Joshua Houston
Mm.
and the protection of the Joshua Houston Junior Home.
Sure.
He has saved the house. They have restored it beautifully. And it has now been used as a site where people can come.
Mhm.
We had the good fortune to bring 7 of the Black Houston descendants to Huntsville. And thanks to Mac Woodward, we were able to give them a tour of not just the home, but for them to actually go out to the cemetery that Mac has been critical about cleaning and restoring and preserving. And they were able to put their hands on the actual tombstones of their ancestors. And so for me, that's one of the things that is so wonderful about Huntsville. And for those that are from other areas,
Sure.
to have families, not just the Gibbs brothers, but other families in town, the Easoms and the Rogers, and certainly all of these families that have preserved the history of Huntsville and encouraged people to see it. So this is something that I run a very small tour company. I'm sorry we didn't get to go on the bus this afternoon, but it was on a wine tour. Sorry. And we could have gone on a wine tour.
Did a lot of whining about that. wasn't
Yes,
you?
yes, that's right. But this is one of the things that is so wonderful about Huntsville is that we have a history, not just Sam Houston, but the history of Huntsville itself that is preserved and expanded on by local families. So I think our local families are to be commended for preserving the history of Huntsville.
Certainly, and it tickles me to no end when you get descendants of Sam Houston that come on site. And I get the same feeling, I have the same pleasure, if you will, when we have descendants of the Alabama Coushatta tribe who, when their ancestors came to visit Sam Houston here, when those people come back to this site, you see this site has meaning to them and it's special. And the same can be said about the descendants of Joshua Houston. They are as welcome here and as entertaining to be with as any of the other Houston descendants or the Alabama Coushatta, because their family is as tied to this property as our Sam Houston's family. So it is very nice to be able to see those connections.
Just real quick, I think it's important, and I think this, from the very first time this committee met, to tell the story of Texas, that we emphasize we want to tell the whole story, every part of that story. And I think that's what's so important, and I think that's what we can encourage is these sites and all the things that people are doing to tell the whole story and to tell about the relationships within those stories.
Yeah, just to be clear too, Mac, when were you the director here?
I retired in 21.
Well, that's not what I asked. I asked when you started.
Huh?
I asked when you started.
Oh, 94.
All right, so we've got a past director here speaking to a current director here, and that explains some of the give and take and back and forth,
Yeah.
just so that we understand that this is all part of the public record. And I want to make sure the public record was crystal clear. And you live in Huntsville.
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's why the Huntsville boosting was going on over here.
Well, and
Uh,
if we're going to be honest and open, I have to then add also that I was in the first cohort of graduate students for what we call the Crim Reaper.
The Grim Reaper, all right. Now, this is a very cozy bunch here. But I think the point was well made that that Huntsville does a really nice job of, as a community, kind of coming together with all these sorts of things, and y'all have done yeoman work, you're doing yeoman work. Huntsville shows well. Any other questions? All right, I appreciate your testimony. Thank you. All right, next up, we're going to have Carolyn Spears, who's the Executive Director of the Old Stone Fort at Stephen F. Austin State University. And there's some things going on there that we're going to learn about. Awesome. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys. I walking around with Dr. Krim, I am reminded that I am not an historian. I work in a history museum and I'm a museum manager. I love collections. Put me in a closet with collections to take care of, that. I'm all over that. I love education. I love talking about the Stone Fort Museum, and I love teaching people about Texas history. But I studied anthropology and art. So this is, it's fun to, as you were talking, walking around, just throwing out this piece of information and that, like, I don't have those pieces of information. It's wonderful to hear. So for the record, my name is Carolyn Spears. As you said, I'm the director of the Stone Fort Museum on the campus of Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas. However, today I'm here to talk to you not just about the Stone Fort Museum, but I'm representing all of the small museums in Nacogdoches. Really, I want to talk about, and surrounding areas, I want to advocate for small museums and their role in supporting Texas, the public's understanding of Texas and Texas history. The Stone Fort Museum opened on October 16, 1936, and I did not know, I feel really stupid, again, refer to me not being a history person. I did not know this facility was in 1936. This is the Texas Centennial Facility. I have been here many times, didn't know that. Designed by architect Hal Tucker, the museum represents the vision of the Nacogdoches Historical Society to celebrate the Texas Centennial with a replica of Antonio Healy Barbo's stone house. The 18th century home was the center of town life for over 100 years and became known as the Old Stone Fort. The replica was established as the town's first museum. And for almost 90 years now, I'm stretching it. We're a little ways away from 90, but I'm going there. I'm going there. I'm ready. For almost 90 years, has served the university and Nacogdoches and the regional community, patrons from all over, with programs that tell the story of East Texas, early East Texas, especially the Spanish and Mexican periods, given the nature of the building that we're in. The museum's mission is to preserve Eastern Texas history and support the mission of the university as an academic support unit within the College of Liberal and Applied Arts. 1 full-time staff and multiple part-time students support all museum operations, including education, research, exhibits, collection management, development, admin, you name it, and the garden out front. That's my job. As the campus' oldest source for public programming of regional history, the museum contributes significantly to the university's ability to serve the local and regional community through K-12 programs and special events. Museum operations provide SFA students with transformative learning opportunities, including classroom projects, practicums, internships. We collaborate with programs and departments across campus, including public history, art, biology, mass communications, quite a few, hospitality. We're breaking the university silo barriers And in many ways, we're the only place on campus where all these folks can get together and work on the same project because of university silo barriers that I'm sure you're all familiar with. In 2024, 830 student learning hours made history happen. This past summer, a public history graduate student completed a master's thesis on authoring an application for the museum to the National Register of Historic Places. Projects such as this deepen student educational experiences in ways that would not otherwise be possible. I can't tell you how excited I am about that application being submitted. It's been a long haul. In addition to campus partners, the museum routinely collaborates. In fact, we could not succeed without community partners, including the Nacogdoches Public Library, Nacogdoches and San Augustine Main Street programs, and importantly, all of the other small museums in the area in Nacogdoches. Historic sites, a department, since we are showing my slides, let's show historic site, the next slide, whoever's in charge of this. Yeah. Yes, and so that's okay. In addition to campus partners, the museum routinely collaborates, as I said, with places like historic sites. A department of the city of Nacogdoches, it manages 4 structures listed on the National Register of Historic Places, including 2 homes, a church, and a railroad depot. The Stern Hoya House, an 1830 dog trot built by Adolphus Stern, and the Durst Taylor Historic House dating to 1835 are the 2 oldest frame houses in Nacogdoches. And if you will go to the next slide, you will see, because these are evidently out of order, so that's okay. That's okay. We are, maybe go back one. Yeah, we're out of order. There we are. Slow down. Slow down. Slow that train. Their histories span the Texas Revolution through the Victorian period. At the Stern home, interpretation extends to the grounds with native trees, an herb garden, and a gazebo reminiscent of a summer house that Stern referred to in his diary, which is a wonderful diary. The Durst Taylor site features a fully functioning smokehouse, blacksmith shop, I can't say that, blacksmith shop, chicken coop, heirloom gardens, and a sugarcane mill. In 2005, an interpretive center was added behind the original home, and it has exhibits that focus on all of the families that lived in the home. So, and it is also a nice place to be able to gather because the home's quite small. Recently renovated by the city, Zion Hill Baptist Church was home to one of the oldest African-American Baptist congregations in Texas, founded in 1878 by Reverend Lawson Reed. The congregation moved into the church designed and built by architect Dietrich Rolfs in 1914. And yes, we are. That's the second one right there, Zion Hill Baptist Church. The Nacogdoches Railroad Depot was built by Southern Pacific Railroad in 1911 and was in service through 1954. The depot is home to a transportation museum that chronicles the rich history of the railroad and its passengers. Across the 4 properties, Nacogdoches Historic Sites delivers a wide array of programs and services to the public, free of charge, including Junior Engineer Days at the depot, it's one of my favorites, Thursday in the Garden at the Durst Taylor House, a very Victorian Christmas at the Stern Hoya House. So of course, Stern had parties, and so they had parties, and live musical performances at the Zion Hill Baptist Church. Historic Sites properties provide internship opportunities to SFA students, and staff collaborate with other heritage organizations across the region, including the Stone Fort Museum. The old Nacogdoches University building, built in 1845, is operated by the Nacogdoches Federation of Women's Club as a museum focused on education. The all-volunteer group has made possible major renovations. I am so jealous with what they're able to accomplish, and is currently collaborating with SFA. Yes, it's the one on the top. Collaborating with SFA faculty and staff in an upgrade of exhibits and collections management procedures. In the SFA Steen Library, the East Texas Research Center is an archive that houses collections representing 38 counties in Texas and 7 in Louisiana. We'll ignore the Louisiana part. A digital archive provides online access to 36 collections, including the Charlie Wilson papers and Bobby Johnson's oral history collection, which is amazing. The archive is one of 23 regional historical resource depositories in Texas, providing public access to local government historical records. The Nacogdoches Fire Museum opened recently in 1996 and is housed in the downtown firehouse that opened in 1908. Same firehouse, the same building. So the building that once provided stables for horse-drawn apparatus now houses Big Bertha, the town's first full-engine fire truck dating to 1923, Big Bertha. Operated by the city, the museum preserves early collections of the fire department, and they're going through some renovations of their own right now. Millard's Crossing Historic Village is the vision of Lyra Millard Thomas. Established in 1968, the reconstructed village showcases 16 structures representing 19th century East Texas architecture. Managed as a private nonprofit, the 37-acre site provides tours and a roster of events to the public. And Nacogdoches is a small town, and that's only a few of our historic sites. But I'd like to tell you about a couple more. In addition to historic sites, an inclusive view of Texas includes the arts and sciences. Texas history includes the natural history of Texas and the creative endeavors of Texans. The Cole Art Center is housed in a renovated 1880s opera house in downtown Nacogdoches, managed by the SFA School of Art. The center includes 3 galleries in which exhibitions by SFA faculty and national and local artists are hosted year-round. In 2000, the Stone Fort Museum displayed a letter opener carved by Sam Houston on loan from the Sam Houston Memorial Museum. This letter opener, whittled on the floor of the United States Senate. I have some traveling devices here. Hang on. Make that thing sit still. Whittled on the floor of the United States Senate, it surprised so many visitors. They would see that and gasp, because that's not Sam. And as many as Derek has spoken about, seeing the whole person, being allowed to see a whole person is revelatory. The object crafted by Sam transformed him from a one-dimensional character into a real person with avocational interests, other things he liked to do. In 2019, the Cole Art hosted the exhibition Caddo Contemporary, Present and Relevant. That brought the work of a living artist, Caddo artist, to Texas, East Texas, the ancestral home of the Caddo Nation. This exhibit is an example, in my mind, of Dr. Fraser's windshield business, learning from the past and looking to the future. In 1997, the Stone Fort Museum mounted its first exhibit on El Camino Real de los Tejas. Over the next 15 years, the museum hosted statewide workshops, more exhibits, and installed a demonstration garden, all centered on the Camino Real. The work was a collaboration with faculty from forestry, SFA Gardens, Public History, National Park Service, Trails Office, Texas Parks and Wildlife, and more. Understanding the trail requires understanding the land. SFA Gardens encompasses 138 acres of green space with 5 gardens. The 42-acre Piney Woods Native Plant Center is dedicated to the collection, conservation, and propagation of endangered or near endangered plants native to East Texas. SFA Garden teaches Texans and transplants about the land they stand on and the environment through which they move. Dr. Fraser also talked about the need to get it right. If we could go to, there we are, I love that sign, not. Dr. Fraser talked about this, the need to get it right, and this slide shows a sign that was installed on North Street sometime in the 1930s or 40s. Positioned at the entrance to the university and directing visitors to the museum, the sign that reads, "Built 1779," perpetuated the idea that the museum is the original Old Stone Fort. If you could go to the next slide. This is the original Old Stone Fort that was in downtown Nacogdoches. And if you could go to the next slide. And this is also the Old Stone Fort. I won't cry. Torn down in 1902 because it sat on valuable property in downtown Nacogdoches. And there we are. The sign, thankfully gone, pointed to this building. I love that officer. He looks so indignant. This building, a Texas Centennial Landmark structure that represents the will of the townspeople in 1934 to create a new museum and commemorate an important lost landmark. The Old Stone Fort is now almost 90 years old. I'm going to be saying that for 10 years. 3 buildings in Nacogdoches have worn the name Old Stone Fort. The 18th century stone house built by Ibarbo. The one-story structure that stood from 1907 to 1936 on the corner of Rusk and Fredonia Streets, and the 1936 Centennial Museum structure. Conflating 3 different structures into one diminishes the story of each. Getting it right will build a richer, multidimensional story of my home state. So, the reason I tell this story is to say thank you for taking the high road and setting your sights high, telling a rich story. The sites I've discussed are joined by many more small, rural, often volunteer museums and historical societies. Small museums are on the front lines. We talk to everyone, listen, and hope to connect patrons with the information they need. We love digging deeper. The story on the surface is just a piece. We want the whole story. I know that a person hasn't heard the full story of Texas when they tour an exhibit on Spanish Nacogdoches, and then they say to me, "I thought this was a museum on Texas history." I only use real examples. Every conversation is an opportunity to expand horizons for that broader view. Thank you for setting aside time to discuss challenges and opportunities in promoting Texas and the grit that small museums offer in telling that story. I want to conclude with something that a visitor said to me this past month, because it's true of small museums, but it's true of all museums. It's bigger on the inside than the outside. It was wonderful. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that. Questions?
Bet.
Yes, ma'am.
This is wonderful. I did not realize I've been bringing people to Nacogdoches for, well, 7 or 8 years now. And we've been to the Stern Hoya House and the
Mhm.
Durst House, but I didn't realize there were all these other places. Had y'all considered maybe having a flyer that includes all the different?
I think that right now, digital delivery is all we've got, and it is through the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I
okay.
can't say that that even includes everything. When you come to one site, we send you to the other sites. Or at least I will. I'm not positive about my student employees right now doing that, but my student employees are very good. But that sort of engagement where you send people on. But one of the things that we're working on right now, and in fact, we're working on it with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, is all of the museums in town, and it's not just in town. This is, as far as I know, this is a problem everywhere, being able to staff the joint. It is very difficult. It's me and as many students as I can grab off the streets. Staffing the place is difficult. Getting volunteers is difficult. And in terms of not wanting to compete with others, That's one area where we do compete. And I want to remove that competition from the table. So it's a project that many of all the heritage site directors, we used to get together and talk once a month pre-pandemic, so many things pre-pandemic. And we're starting to do that again. But one of the ideas that I had many years ago is that are you familiar with the Master Gardeners Program?
Oh, of course.
Right? So we need a museum docent master program. Because I have, there are some folks who are gregarious. They want to be out front. They want to be talking to visitors. And there are other volunteers who would prefer to be working with collections, kind of like me. And then there are other people who want to build programs or write grants. God love them. And so all of those folks, I don't have time to train each of them individually. And that's what the Master Gardeners Program is about. And so what we need and what we're going to begin to put together and develop in Nacogdoches is a volunteer training program where the volunteer gets trained and then they can go to any site and we collaborate on what's going on. Is it an event? Do you need a collection project done? And once you've gone through the training, then you can go to that site and that site director doesn't have to spend a day teaching you how to catalog. They can, and they don't have to teach you anything about the site. We're going to have tour operators that are ready to roll. So that's one way in which we'll be able to have folks who are trained and ready, trained in hospitality, so that in fact they will then send the visitor to the next site, trained on each of the sites in education and be able to talk in a reasonable way, at least, about the histories of each of the sites so that we keep people moving through the different places.
I thought SFA had a public history program.
We have a public history program.
But it doesn't
But,
do that.
but no, Perking Beisel is, she is one of the professors
Wow,
there, and
yeah.
she's helping me with this, yes.
Because it sounds like a wonderful idea. Perfect to, get students trained in all the different areas, all the
Well, now
different
I do
museums.
use her students. I'm talking
Yeah.
about training townspeople. I'm talking
That
about
too.
bringing in volunteers,
Right.
right?
Right, absolutely. Docents.
Yeah,
Get
Yeah.
those little old ladies that don't have anything better to do.
yeah, yeah. I didn't hear you
Like a
say that.
continuing education program is what I'm hearing. Is
Yeah.
There you
there-
go.
Is there a kind of a master pass to all these places
Oh, we're all free. So yes.
so yeah, master classes. Can you fog a
Yes.
mirror? Come on in. All right.
I take that back. Millard's Crossing has an admission fee, but that is only if you want a guided tour. If you want to just tour the properties on your own, I believe it's free, still free.
Let me bounce something off of it and get your reaction, and this will be kind of a standing question for everybody. In France, one of the things they do is they have a pool of people that can do historic interpretation that then kind of rotates around to various sites throughout France. So if it's, a French Revolution event, they're all out there wearing their French Revolution garb. Medieval event, they're, mounting up and heading to another part of the country to do that. It's kind of an interesting pool. Pooling of resources idea, sort of like what I just heard you talk about.
Yes,
on a-
I don't need to do the whole country. I have no aspiration to do all of Texas.
Yeah, all
But-
of Texas would be a big chore.
Yeah,
Hey, guess
yeah.
what? The event this time's in McAllen.
yeah, yeah. Although
would-
I do think that if we can figure out the logistics, if we can figure out how this could work, this could be a model for other, at least small communities.
Well, and I'm thinking
Uh,
too, at Gettysburg, you can't give a tour unless you've gone through some sort of training.
Right.
And same thing with the blue badge guides in Scotland, places like
Mhm.
that. I've always wondered if there shouldn't be some sort of program like that for the state of Texas that could help facilitate some of the issues that face small museums. I mean, one of the Summerly Foundation came out with a program or a report not too many years ago saying that small museums. Okay. Yeah, small museums are toast unless they can find some sort of bigger partner. And so I've had that, well, that's the way it hit me. And so I was like, yikes, that's a pretty grim report. Well, but I mean, by bigger partner, either a university or county government, something that otherwise you're really operating at a huge disadvantage. I was at a museum in Stanford, and the thing about that museum is that it's up there all by itself. And you've got a nice cluster of folks.
Yes, and we really do collaborate a great deal.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not on one of our projects, but it's, for example, this fall, we will be collaborating with, the Nacogdoches Public Library on their Big Read. And so we're working together to do something that explicates the story of, the Big Read book, which is safe online right now. No, can't remember, sorry. And other things, our next event coming up is a collaboration with Historic Sites. It's one of the Camino Real
Sure.
celebration events that will take place on October 19th. We're having a jamboree, and we'll be as in I, we'll be making jelly that day, jelly demonstrations on site with funds from our garden, which is the Spanish colonial demonstration garden, and talking about heritage foodways and
Sure.
preservation methods, and of course music, and of course eating jelly. We're going to do some Dutch oven cooking, so we'll have the bread.
Yeah, you got the bread and the jelly. Any other questions? Sherry, you got anything?
Yeah, just a quick thing, Caroline, and let me say to the tech people that
Yeah, well, she also said the Master Gardeners program took root, so Sherry's got a,
just a quick question,
You're muted.
Carolyn.
oh. there you
No,
go.
I'm not.
I'm looking over to the tech guys.
Yeah, and Caroline is muted as well. Caroline is
Nope, you're still
muted.
muted, Sherry.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Sherry.
We have some intervention going on. Stand by.
Yeah, there.
I've got lots more to bring my people to, obviously.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, then while we're waiting for her to get her volume on, the old rule of thumb in heritage and cultural tourism is people will travel to a location if they can spend 4x the drive time doing stuff. And, Stanford, they're out there all by themselves, and you just hauled a long way to get there to see that museum. So that's a disadvantage y'all don't have.
In our they already have, and I believe it's through actually going to direct me the trails program, forest trails.
Sure.
That they tore down
Oh,
the original fort in 1902 and did not rebuild it.
We can hear you now, Sherry.
Oh, okay.
great.
My question is, I just wanted to clarify just a little point. Great presentation, Carolyn. So they tore down the original Old Stone Fort in 1902 because the land was valuable. Huge mistake, obviously. And they rebuilt what we're looking at. Did I miss something in 1936?
So I hope you guys could hear me. I just realized for some reason my light was off.
Yeah,
Just towards the end.
Oh, okay. So in the original building was torn down in 1902. The land had been purchased by the Perkins brothers. They put up a modern drugstore. The town was excited about that, but to their credit, the Cum Concilio Club, a ladies' study club, launched what I believe is the first preservation effort in Texas, a statewide effort to save the building. But it was torn down in 1902. That group, they saved the stones. They used the wood. The Perkins brothers gave them the stones. They saved the stones and they used the wood for fundraising. And in 1907, they built what is I call it the memorial building. I have so many buildings. a one-story structure on what is called in town Washington Square. It is now the site of the elementary school, Thomas J. Rest Middle, but it's the Caddo Village site, which was then inexplicably used for the town's square. So things had to leave, mounds had to leave. And on one of those corners, they built the this one-story sort of arts and crafts structure that really was the beginning of the museum. The Cum Concilio Club used it as a library for their meetings. It was the home of the orchestra in Nacogdoches. We used to have an orchestra, a town orchestra. It was the home of the first library in Nacogdoches. And that place stood, and first SFA classes were held there in 1923. That building stood until 1936. And with in 1934, the Nacogdoches Historical Society said, we need to celebrate the centennial. And we're going to get together, we're going to form a society, and this is what we're going to do. We are going to rebuild the stone house, and we're going to make it a museum. And plus also, we're going to translate Spanish documents. That was their draft to themselves, their bylaws. So in 1934, they began that effort, and in 1936, it happened very quickly. The Texas Centennial allowed them they gave them money to rebuild. It had to be, interestingly enough, it had to be on state property, and that's why we are on the SFA campus. Dr. Birdwell and the architect Hal Tucker walked the campus at the time and chose the site. So I feel very strongly about the Stone Fort Museum staying on that site that was chosen by Dr. Birdwell and the architect Hal Tucker. There are rumblings every now and then about moving the Stone Fort Museum or tearing it down and putting it someplace else, because then we would have not 3 buildings, but 4 buildings. And whenever those rumblings start, I think, this is me. This is not the director of the museum. This is me. I think when a town has done something like tear down the old stone fort, just imagine for yourselves if it had not been torn down. It'd be a different town. It would be a different town because we would have an 18th century structure. So when something like that happens, the town really never forgets, and they want to fix it. And one of our leading missions, in my mind, is preservation, and to get folks to understand how important preservation is. Preservation for the original building didn't happen. We've lost it. Gone is gone. Preservation for this building is important.
Back to your question, it's been kind of a mobile home.
Yeah.
It's Gilly Barbo's mobile home. Because it started with the site downtown now is Big Bank.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was taken down and then ultimately reconstructed at SFA, but there's always some university official that's interested in that real estate.
Yep.
And so it's
A little piece of the story that caught me was the 1902 and the women stopping this. You know, this is very parallel to Clara Driscoll and Dezabala in San Antonio, where the same thing happened. It was in the middle of town. There was a big press to tear the Alamo down. It was a mess and it needed to be developed, and those women stopped it. The women there were not as quick, but they did it sounds like they got some bricks, they got some wood. So we got a movement there. That's the piece of your story that I caught.
And I love that piece of the story. The Cum Concilio Club is still around.
wouldn't have any
Right.
Texas history without Texas women. So
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
exactly.
any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Thank you
right,
so
I
much for
appreciate
your
it.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Amy Rogers from San Jacinto. Tell us about the great things going on down there. Oh, nice. I like nice pictures.
Perfect. Thank you. That was my next question.
Okay, and we're still on here. Hello, thank you very much. I am Amy Rogers. I am the Executive Director of both the San Jacinto Battleground State Historic Site on behalf of the Texas Historical Commission, but also the San Jacinto Museum, which is housed within the Monument Building. I also represent the San Jacinto Museum and Battlefield Association. So I wear both a hat for the state agency and for the private non-for-profit. And so you've all have provided so many great segues for me to kind of talk about what we do. So I appreciate that. Let me start here. Where should I point that? There we go. So we talk about collaboration a lot, and I'll start with just collaboration between the state agency involved at San Jacinto and the non-for-profit running the museum. And the reason that this relationship came about, which is fairly new, THC took over the site from TPWD in 2019 and had this wonderful idea to approach the Museum Association and say, we are doing the same thing. We believe in the same mission. We can do so much more if we partner together on this. And so hence was born this working relationship, and hence was born the role that I serve there at the site. Sorry. So combined between both the THC staffing and the museum staff, we do have a staff that totals 29 people, which is providing me to be here today. And much of what you'll hear me talk about today is done through the work of the staff and through our board of directors, through the state agency, people in this room. I just get the pleasure to get to talk to you all about it. So I just want to acknowledge that they do all of the hard work. So I talked about myself also on site for management on the battleground side of our site. We have Andy Smith, who's our site manager, who's been involved in museums, cultural institutions, history, archaeology for well over 20 years. And David Avila, who is our director of museum operations, who has been at the San Jacinto Museum for 26 years now and climbed his way up to that position as director of museum operations. I also am realizing as other people were talking, leave it up to San Jacinto to come in here with a bit of an ego that I don't even need to take the time to explain to you who we are or why we're important or what happened there. So I do apologize. My presentation will focus a lot more on what we're doing at San Jacinto and how we're interpreting the history and how we're serving our visitors. If anyone needs me to back off and give a little history on San Jacinto, I will do that. But yeah, right.
Yeah,
But-
we can do
yeah.
kind of a lightning round here. Does anybody know what San Jacinto means?
Classic San Jacinto with the ego of everyone just knows who we are. So that was a real moment. So I
It was the
apologize.
culminating battle of the
Yeah,
Texas Revolution. We move on.
18 minutes that changed the world.
That's right.
You're welcome, everyone. So right quickly here, just some quick site visitation numbers. These are the official numbers that the THC gathers for us. We could get into a whole thing about capturing visitation numbers. When your site is free visitation, your museum is paid visitation, you technically don't know how many people are coming there. We know it's a lot. We have a lot of people, but we want a lot more. So I also provided some photographs there. You see some people enjoying the museum exhibits. We are updating currently our gallery spaces, just making them a little more appealing, easier to read, less text heavy, more artifact heavy, a little more engaging for our guest. And then you'll see a group of students here who are learning if they have what it takes to join the Texian Army, which is quite fun. And then I'll move on. I'll talk a little more about the programming, our school field trips, and our outreach. This most recent fiscal year and our fiscal year runs from September 1 to August 31st. We just wrapped up our fiscal year 24. So that's the numbers I'll be sharing here with you. Another thing that makes my numbers fun is that my museum association fiscal year calendar year, THC fiscal year, September 1 to August 31st. So I try to make it match. But we did a little over 7,300 students that came through a booked field trip through a public or private school. 4,500 of those students came from Title I schools, and we offer free admission to the Title I schools that we get funding from a grant program that supports those students getting to come for free. Because if we weren't providing that, 4,500 of those students probably wouldn't have been able to come through the front doors. We had 7,000 visitors who participated in an educator or interpreter-led program. That is someone who specifically came up, engaged with, you'll see some of the photos here. Those numbers are counted when someone comes up and actually engages with one of those interpreters or one of those educators and learns a little more in-depth hands-on history activity. And then we were able to serve over 2,300 individuals through an outreach opportunity. That means we went to a local fall festival or another historic sites event, went to a local chamber of commerce and had a booth. We reached 23 other additional people who didn't have to come to us for us to be presenting to them the history of San Jacinto. I've listed a couple of examples of programs that we do, and I would invite any of you to come out and experience some of these. They're a lot of fun. Boom Cannon demos, one of the most popular programs that we do. Feeding an Army, flag making, haversack packing, quill and ink. Watching the kids do the quill and ink is quite fun and messy. And then some of the field trip offerings that I've listed there, you can see are tailored to the grade that the student is coming in. And I lost my place in my thing. Here it is. Texas Revolution Celebrities is geared for our 4th grade students. Discovering Battle of San Jacinto using primary sources is for our 7th grade students. Visualizing the runaway scrape can be tailored for either 4th or 7th grade. And then the Battle of San Jacinto in Bertha, Texas is meant for students or classes that have not yet learned about the battle in class before coming to us. The next thing I will go to is these are what we call our headliner events each year. In addition to all of those programs that I just mentioned, which generally we have some type of programming going on every single day. And in particular, we ramp them up on the weekends. But we have the 2 headliner events each year, many of which everyone knows is the San Jacinto Day reenactment and celebration that we do every April. And then we have added a sister event or a complementary event in the fall that we're calling our Fall Fandango. So the San Jacinto Day event, of course, is very military history focused, as it should be. We talk about the Battle of San Jacinto and why it happened, how it happened, and what happened after that. We have added something new to that event just last year, and Dr. Krim joined us for the inaugural event, but we've done a lecture series on that day as well. For people to learn more about particular topics within San Jacinto Day. We had about 7,200 people who participated in the San Jacinto Day related events in 2024. So it's a great number. San Jacinto Days of the past could have 20, 30,000 people. If any of you have been to an event out there of that magnitude, you know that parking is a complete and total nightmare. So some people hear the number 7,200 and think that, oh man, I remember the days they had 20,000. That's intentional. We want to make sure that we can get people in and out safely. They can get in and out and have a positive experience. We can manage them a lot better and provide a much more in-depth program rather than just crowd control and keeping people safe. So we have we do a reenactment in the early afternoon and another one in the late afternoon to help keep that flow of people going through. The other event that we do is just our 2nd year. It's coming up on October 19th. It's called the Fall Fandango. And at this one, we focus more on civilian life. What would life been like for me and you if we lived in 1830s Texas? So we do living history activities. There's historical games. There's historical cooking demos, music, dancing, fun activities for the kids. They get to churn their own butter, wash their own laundry, dry vegetables, et cetera, et cetera. So sets us apart from just your typical fall festival. Our inaugural event back in 2023 did see 1,200 people who came out to an event that they had no idea what they were getting themselves into. So we hope with the marketing and the video footage that we were able to share this year and promoting the event, it gives people a better idea of what to expect. And we really do hope to see that attendance grow for that event. Next up, something else that we do that is very important to the site is our ongoing prairie restoration efforts. A lot of people also don't understand what it means to be restoring the natural prairie. A lot of people also don't necessarily understand that the San Jacinto Battleground is not going to look like a Civil War battleground or a battleground that they see on the East Coast that they went and took a tour of, and everything's pristine and short mowed and clean. The grounds of San Jacinto is a rough place to be. And so we are doing a better job of explaining to the public that we didn't forget to mow the grass, that was actually intentional. And here's why. So we're doing a better job of explaining to people and sharing the history of the grounds themselves and telling them more about what we're doing to continue to restore those natural prairie. So that was started obviously when TPWD was managing the site. THC has continued that through the work of master naturalist volunteers. These volunteers give about 30 to 40,000 hours a year to restoring the natural prairie grasses. It's quite incredible. And our maintenance supervisor is currently going through the master naturalist training, so he too can be a key member of that team and making sure we're doing what we need to do. We've also done a lot of work through restoring the tidal marshes surrounding the prairie, and those efforts are going to continue as we move forward. We just kind of finished a big project with, thankfully, TxDOT, through their very generous donation, about $1 million worth of work, came in and started clearing out a lot of the non-native plants and non-native trees and invasive species that had started to completely take over the grounds. And that now has allowed it to open it back up and really show people the transition from that prairie to that marsh. When we're trying to explain to them, you know, when the Mexican soldiers' backs were up against the wall and they just took off running and they got stuck in the marsh, people are so, well, why would they do that? So we're able to show them now how quickly that land transitions from that prairie to that marsh area. So it's doing a better job of interpreting the actual grounds. These efforts continue to really tell the story of the events that occurred on our site. And as I mentioned, there's lots and lots more restoration work planned in the future in that regard. So when I talk about future, it's kind of a really big future, and it's a really exciting future. So I look forward to showing you just a few images here today. These are our master plan, or as some people like to call it, the aspirational plan, because we know what happens with master plans. We are in the early stages of our project. We are much further behind on our project than John is at Ouachita on the Brazos. Brian at San Felipe obviously has completed his. San Jacinto is kind of next up in that queue. And a huge thank you to the state of Texas and our state legislatures who believe in what we do and support what we do and want to see San Jacinto be exactly what it should be. It should be right up there with the Alamo. People should know that we're there. So we were giving significant funding to do this project. So with that, here's just, we call them the pretty pictures on the paper. Like I've said before, we are just getting into the phase where the architects are being hired, the engineers are being hired, the historians, the archaeologists, all the really smart people that can take the pretty pictures and make them an actual reality. So this picture here is just a quick glimpse or a mock-up of what the new proposed site would look like right around the monument. There in the center, that letter K is where the current monument is. That letter A is where a proposed new purpose-built visitor center will go. So that will allow us to funnel people through that visitor center. It will have interactive gallery spaces within that visitor center that kind of gives them what they need to know about the site before branching out and exploring the site. It's going to clean it up quite a bit, add additional parking, easier access for school buses to get in and unload, just a better flow of traffic around the monument itself, and then additional ADA access, because on the monument, you've just got that one ramp on the, is that the north side, south side? Don't get me lying about directions, but it's adding additional ADA access there. Next picture here is how the monument itself will be reimagined. The monument being used as a museum comes with lots and lots of challenges. It turns out the monument wasn't built to house a museum. Shocking, right? So it's a real challenge to keep the artifacts at a level that the humidity is proper for them, the temperature is proper for them. There's the running joke about, oh, let me go into the basement at the Alamo, ha ha. San Jacinto has an actual basement. It's not a joke for us. And that's where much of the collections is held. So you have a lot of monitoring that goes on. So collections will be pulled out, a purpose-built collection and center will be built for those, and it will be a research center as well. And if anyone has done any research with our archivist, Lisa, on the second floor, the library will move out into that research center as well, and giving a lot more access to people to be able to get to that. And the monument, the current gallery spaces will be converted into more galleries and history of the monument itself. When you are talking about the history of a site that has had a museum on its site for as long as it has, you've got to deal with telling the history of the battle itself. But we now also need to tell the history of the monument and why the monument was built and what it stands for. So we will do that a bit in the actual monument, where the history of the actual battle will move over into that visitor center. You'll have a space in that visitor center for changing exhibits, because we want to keep people coming back. Some cafe, some retail space. If you've also been out to the monument recently and you thought, well, where can I have lunch? Well, yeah, there's a wonderful Monument Inn down the street, but outside of that, you've got to go back out to the freeway. So we'll have a small cafe space there. So families are being encouraged to stay a little longer if the kids need a snack or a sandwich or something like that. Not full restaurant quality. We're not getting into the restaurant business for sure. And then where the current theater is, we'll be moving we'll be putting a theater in the new visitor space. So the current theater will be converted into a special event space. Again, as it stands now. We'll see what happens. Here's just a mock-up of what some of those interactive gallery spaces might look like. You've got students or families or guests can walk up and interact one-on-one with these pivotal people of the Battle of San Jacinto, which is going to be really fun, real interactive way for them to learn about these people's stories. It's going to be imperative, and it's a real focus of ours, to ensure that we are telling both the story of the Texian soldiers and the Mexican soldiers. And next picture. Here's a real beautiful picture of what we envision as our new entryway. Again, if you've come to San Jacinto, a lot of people say, where the heck am I going? As you're coming to San Jacinto, you're surrounded by industry, you're surrounded by these plants. These plants are very important to us, and they make us all live in a state that is flushed with cash, but it's not the best look when you're coming to the site. So the new goal is, once you've gotten to what we call Vista Road, when you've turned off at Independence and you're coming down to see the monument, that we are putting fencing and trees, and it's going to block out the plants that are those chemical plants that are on Vista. So the second you turn on the Vista, your eye is to the monument, the rest of it is gone, and you are engrossed, and you are on San Jacinto Battleground. And that kind of sets you up for the rest of what you are going to see. Another picture here is going to show, again, I've talked about the prairie restoration work to better interpret the battleground itself, but we will also have these mode pathways that will show the Texian advance lines. Those are also really hard to explain to people when they can't visually see it. We are a very visual society. So now you can walk amongst these advance path lines, which I think is going to be really, really powerful for people to be able to do that. So all of this stuff sounds great and wonderful, and you think, how are you paying for that? Well, the wonderful state of Texas has gifted us with $142 million to do this project. It's the largest appropriation that the Texas Historical Commission has ever received. So that tells us that the state of Texas believes in us. They think that we're important, and they want to know that this site is going to be around for a very long time. And so we take that very seriously, and we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that this project lives up to the expectations of the people of the state of Texas. Like I'll just kind of go over some of those points that I talked about very quickly. This project will look to restore the San Jacinto Monument and the Battleground as its rightful place as the most important historic site in Texas, and we can all fight that out here in a minute. Restore the battlefield to its 1836 appearance so that the public understands the sequence of events. It will provide interactive and immersive exhibits to excite the public and bring a better understanding of the era and the events. It'll create a world-class destination that promotes and highlights the site's significance in world history, not just Texas history. And it's going to provide a space that is both inspiring, reflective, and educational. And with that, that is the end of that, but I welcome any questions.
Any question? Yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. And that $142 million comes from all of us in the room.
It sure does.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Question down here in the end.
What's gonna happen to the slip with Battlefield Texas?
That's also a wonderful question. So the plan now is for that to be filled in and be restored back to being part of the grounds. It was originally a part of the Battleground. It will likely end up wetlands of some sort because to bring it fully up to, sorry, I'm forgetting the term. It's near impossible, but it will become wetlands of some sort.
Jerry, do you have any questions? Oh, question over here.
You
Yeah.
gotta look to your
I'm
right.
good.
Well, sorry, look to my right. I am turned.
Just a couple quick ones.
Sure.
What's the timeline of spending all of this money and getting this
Sure.
done?
It's about 4 years.
Okay.
We've got a year of contingency if we need the additional year. So about 4 to 5 years.
Okay. And then you
like-
mentioned that one of the reasons you kind of intentionally moved down the number of people that came on San Jacinto Day
Mm.
was because of parking. Is there additional parking as part of this?
There
Okay.
is additional parking as well. And I will also say, and I should have reiterated that more, and many of us have touched on this. Not only do we collaborate as historic sites, as other museums, our communities being so important, but our industry partners. And so Oxy Chemical is the closest to us, and they built this big, fancy, nice, temporary in Oxy's budget, looks a little different than temporary in the rest of ours, lay down parking lot for when they do the, every other year, the word is turnarounds, thank
Oh,
you. When
turnarounds,
they do
yes,
their
yes, yes.
turnarounds, they are going to actually leave that parking lot and loan it out to us for our big events, and it fits another 600 or so vehicles. And we run a shuttle anyways, and so it's just right outside the gate entry off of Vista. So it'd be a quick little 5-minute shuttle ride for our guest.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good for Oxy. Yeah.
The battlefield site, well, that'd be a walking tour, I assume, right?
We will have walking tours. We'll have,
Interpretive sites along the way, or?
we will, yes. So you'll be able to tour the grounds either on your own. There will be interpretive signage. There will be QR codes that you can scan. There will be guided tours, walking tours, tram type tours. I've even heard people joking about the segways, the bicycles. We're going to get people out there in every way possible.
Other questions? Well, I can tell you that, this is long overdue.
It
mean,
very much
The
is.
Battle of San Jacinto is kind of a world-changing event.
It's a big deal.
And you had to bushwhack your way past all the refineries, and then once you got
Yeah.
there, you're trying to figure out, well, where can I get some good shrimp?
Yeah,
And that's down the road at Monument Inn.
exactly.
So, no, this is long overdue.
It
and
is.
Congratulations
Thank
that
you.
it's happening under your tenure.
Thank
I'm
you.
just happy to have lived long enough to see it.
I've
and-
heard of many of people say that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's the same sort of thing that's going on with all these sites. Is it going to be Gallagher and Associates that's doing your design?
Gallagher and Associates is involved with this project, yes.
Because I'm
Yes.
working with those guys at the Alamo, so all of a
Yes.
sudden they're going to be the imagination team behind what the Texas Revolution looked like.
They are, and it's really working in our favor that they are working on so many other of these very large projects because they too are going to help us be that constant reminder that all of these sites have to be connected through these
Correct.
things. It's not, yes, this is a project for San Jacinto, but this project will highlight San Jacinto and the other historic sites and how do they all tie into
How do they
the
match?
Texas history. Exactly.
How do they match?
It's a much larger story. I keep joking, our ego at San Jacinto, we jokingly even say we're San Jacentric, but San Jacinto didn't happen in a vacuum. So it's important for us to make sure that people understand that.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is, Brian McCauley from the San Felipe de Austin Historic Site. Yeah, before you get started, here's a comment that came as an aside from my left. Said, did you ever think that you would ever see, this much money put into these historic sites?
I used to work at the George.
And, I mean, Jerry, I mean, you had a ringside seat for a bunch of this stuff. It's bound to be mind boggling.
The continued rate of the Parks and Wildlife sporting goods tax.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's all for Parks and Wildlife and history and all that stuff, except
yeah,
we need it.
yeah,
Yeah, we can't do that.
yeah, that's cool. All right. Are we about to get him locked and loaded?
Interesting segue, San Jacinto talks about their ego, and I was gonna get up and say, we're the site none of you have heard of, and we have the other problem, and maybe I don't have slides either, so that'll be a fun moment if I'm just gonna soft shoe for you here in a second.
Well, give us
What
an
do you think, Ted?
overview of what your site is so that, we'll have that.
Sure. So apologies, I'm imagining these slides are going to magically appear. We'll see if that happens or not. I was joking with my colleagues to say one of us should have brought a laptop just to make sure everything played out in our favor. As Amy mentioned, my project at San Felipe de Austin became the first of the development properties that the Texas Historical Commission was able to complete after we transferred sites from 2008. And a lot of great things came out of that. We didn't get a chance to work with Gallagher and Associates, so I appreciate you bringing them up because they're certainly someone that we've benefited from in terms of their advice and vision of this bigger story. But we were a little ahead of their schedule, and so we'll be figuring out how we factor in some of this connectivity as we go forward. And to that end, it's been very important for us to establish to Texans and to stakeholders in this history journey that we deserve a seat at the table, that we're an important part of this larger Texas development story, Texas independence story, Texas revolution story. And one of the ways we do that frequently is by helping visitors understand that the people that they learn about at these other sites that may be more prominent and better known typically walk the streets of San Felipe in some capacity, that we're really rooted in this story. So I'm going to work off my talking notes and apologize that you'll have to look at the slides that I can't see at the moment. So we'll see how that all goes forward. The town site that we interpret was founded as the headquarters of Stephen F. Austin's capital city in Mexican Texas. So when Stephen F. Austin is luring immigrants primarily from the United States, the southern United States, this was the place that he chose to manage his land grant process. And that's one of the reasons that so many of the historic figures of the time end up coming through the town in one way or the other. We just got the privilege of celebrating a bicentennial of sorts. We had 1823 as the founding of the town, the fall of 1823. And then in 1824, you have the actual platting of the town, a lot of the town's initial growth. And then in the summer of 1824, the old 300 land grants are issued. We had a nice little chat with former Land Commissioner Patterson at lunch about some of the resources the General Land Office holds that are related to our story. So they're a great partner of ours. And we recently did a bicentennial exhibition where we got a chance to celebrate some of that story and bring some of those things to my place. My staff and I often refer to that as bringing objects home. And so one of the things I wanted to make a note of, just in the wonderfully complex and rich Texas history stories that we share, Moses Austin is the subject of one of the centennial statues that was commissioned in 1936, one of 20 statues. And he's the only one of those 20 people who never lived in Texas. So he has a statue in San Antonio. And in many ways, we have the benefit of being the de facto home of the Moses and Stephen F. Austin story. which for my staff and I, we realize is a little ironic too, because Moses Austin never set foot where we are. That's not part of his background. But during this bicentennial exhibition, we were privileged to have on loan from the Briscoe Center at the University of Texas a hatchet that had belonged to Moses Austin, had been transitioned to Stephen F. Austin, and which just before he traveled to Mexico City on a rather fateful trip that got him imprisoned in the 1830s, Stephen F. Austin wrote to his brother-in-law and said, very much in the tone of, I may not come back. This may be the last time you hear from me. And the letter says, take care of the hatchet. Look in my trunk and make sure that it's cared for and that the stories of the hatchet are remembered, essentially. So we got a chance to bring that hatchet home for this bicentennial exhibit. And in fact, Director Wright was there for our closing exhibition and got a chance to see it, as I would brag amongst our visitors to say we had doubled our number of Stephen F. Austin associated artifacts by virtue of having that one there in our facility. So we're super excited to be able to bring these stories to light. It's an important part of our story. We don't have enough visitors yet, so that's one of the things we're working on. We benefit from some very structured visitation that's going well for us. So we are educating school children. We saw about 3,500 at our site today out on the west side of Houston this year. So that was a really important part of our operating component. A couple things you probably don't know about the site. One of the reasons it was so challenged and late to the party, as it were, is that the town was intentionally burned during the Texas Revolution. So in the 1920s, the local town folks began the commemorative process. They were clearly getting ready for the centennial and trying to make sure that there was a footprint of this story in the little town of San Felipe. But the archaeological significance would take time to figure out how to utilize, how to interpret. So we've been able to incorporate that. Our modern visitor center opened in 2018. The original footprint, like I said, was commemorated going back to the 1920s. We are the home site of the Stephen F. Austin Centennial statue. It sits on those properties where the original commemoration occurred. And that's how a lot of folks remember our site if they came to see it in the 50s, 60s, or 70s as a child. They remember coming and seeing that statue. So because we're a fairly recent property, like I said, opened in 2018, we have the benefit of some modern technology. We have some very traditional experiences, objects on display. We do a lot of archaeological interpretation. We do a lot of interpretive exhibitry where people can interact with digital media. We have some short film projects. And just recently, about 3 years ago, we opened a second phase of our interpretive experience for visitors, an outdoor exhibit that we call the Via de Austin, in which we have sort of this living history footprint. Oh, look, I'm up. I'm going to catch up real quick, maybe. Oh, is this enough? Let's see. Keep going, keep going, keep going. So there's the old school, there's Moses. There's the picture I borrowed from San Jacinto because nobody knew what San Felipe looked like. So that's a great part of their exhibit. Can we stop here for just a second? I'm going to use this slide to point out some of the things that I think make the site significant enough that it became an important development site for the Historical Commission. So I mentioned it being the capital, it's the de facto political, cultural, economic center of Anglo immigration to Mexican Texas. We talked about in our elevator speech raising money. It's where Spanish Texas transitioned to the Republic of Texas in a short span of about 15 years. The parade of historical figures that I mentioned, I often tell people we can connect almost anybody you would think of in this era, with the exception of David Crockett, to the town of San Felipe de Austin. And he was told to go there, but it didn't quite play out that way in the scheme of things. Let's go to the next slide. I want to get caught up and respect the commission's time, so let's keep rolling. Or can I drive it? Yes. So here's our mural of the burning of the town. I just mentioned to you that that's a significant part of our footprint. When we were doing our planning for the facility, we were thinking about, somewhat jealously, the very pivotal moments that my colleagues at the sites that they represent are known for. March 2nd, April 21st, March the 6th, all these dates that resonate with Texans. And we decided our most important date is March 29th of 1836, when the entire town is put to the torch and destroyed. There's a lot of things that go up into that moment, but that's certainly one of the most pivotal and seminal and speaks to where we are today. There we go. Thank you. So one of our initial goals, like I said, was getting a seat at the table. We wanted to feel that we were substantial enough and to help Texans believe that we needed to sit amongst all of our colleagues who are telling this revolution and independence story. We are certainly well positioned to tell the Mexican Texas era So those are two early flags of the Mexican Republic, followed by two flags at the bottom that are part of the independence movement, both of which were initially manufactured at San Felipe. The 1824 Constitution flag as political protest, and then Stephen F. Austin's proposed flag for the Republic of Texas, which became the militia banner for the local company that marched out hoping to go to the aid of William Barrett Travis. When I mentioned that we try to connect to people, we love doing slides like this where we could just drop in folks. And if you recognize some of these, that's great. Sam Houston's the obvious one. Lorenzo de Zavala, Angelina Payton up at the top, which if you drive through the streets of Austin on Congress Avenue, Austinites know her as Angelina Everly. That involves the archive war, that statuary subject that the land commissioner is certainly familiar with. Angelina Payton was a tavern operator in San Felipe in the early part of her life in Texas, so that's fun for us. Deef Smith, Robert Williamson, Three-Legged Willie, Travis the Slave Joe, who's one of the survivors of the Alamo, and of course, William Travis himself, who is probably the second most famous resident of our town. We also get the privilege of celebrating with people that Santa Ana has a footprint at our town, if that's a celebration, but understanding the footprint of that dynamic of the Texas Revolution story. And then a lot of our visitors who are into the Texas Revolution story recognize that the steamship Yellowstone had a number of unusual connections, and it also docked at our little town back in the good old days. So here's the modern facility that I mentioned a while ago. Opened in 2018. You can see some of the interactive media there. I didn't even think about the fact that you commissioners were going to meet Mikey Sproat. He's in the photo at the table down there in the lower right corner. So he happened to be there for our opening back in 2018 and managed to get himself snagged in that photo. And then you can see some of the archaeology that we try to interpret for guests. We are an active archaeological site, so we still do excavations, and I'll share with you shortly some plans we have for the future there. Our exhibits, like I said, are a mix of historical objects. That's an actual cabin, not the modern lumber you see, but the walls are part of a cabin that we moved into the facility and restored that we believe was built by one of Austin's last settlers near the town of Columbus. And then the one object you can see in the bottom there, that desk, is our Stephen F. Austin associated object, a field desk that we think celebrates its 200th birthday in 2025. That'll be part of our cake cutting next year. We do a significant amount of temporary exhibit installations. It's one of the ways that we help our audience both understand our importance as we see it and ways to connect to other sites. It's also something that lets us borrow a lot of those cool things I mentioned earlier. So those of you that are familiar with Greg Dimmick's work, the Sea of Mud, we had a chance to display much of that archaeology in 2019. And you can see a couple of things we did. Our staff really enjoyed that Faces of Austin's Colony, where we used photography to tell the story of people who occupied a town that didn't see photography in its lifetime. The town was destroyed before these photos were ever taken. We also just finished that bicentennial exhibit that I mentioned to you. So there's a copy of one of the English translations of the Register of Families for the Old 300 that the General Land Office owned to us. That was the first time I believe that's been loaned to anybody for an exhibit. Archaeology I mentioned is a big deal to us. So we're working on a public lab that will open in a couple of years. We have a staff archaeologist. You can see her pictured there in the lower corner. And that photo of those two ladies, part of the Houston Archaeological Society, exposing the brick remnants of a cellar that was part of a hotel building in one of our sites, has become one of the most iconic pictures. We get comments on this all the time. It's been featured in Texas Archaeological Month programming and promotion. And it's a big part of how we celebrate the story of continuing to learn about what happened at San Felipe. This is that outdoor exhibit moment that I mentioned where we cut that ribbon 3 years ago. Here's an overview of those buildings so that people can come and see what might have been here before the fire. This is our analysis and interpretation in an exhibit form of what the buildings might have looked like on one town block. And my staff and I decided to have a good time in the courthouse that day and take a staff photo. And then here's a various representation of the types of programming. We don't do living history every day. We do a lot of special event programming. We do a lot of demonstration on weekends and that sort of thing. But it's a great opportunity for visitors to get up close to history at our site. Happy to take any questions you might have. And if you haven't been to San Felipe, like we lured out Director Wright not long ago, I would encourage you to come see us when you have that opportunity.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And sorry for the technical difficulties.
All good.
Questions on San Felipe Austin? Yeah. Hit your mic.
Sorry. I drive down I-10 quite a bit.
Sure.
The signage, is there an opportunity for better signage there?
So if you haven't seen, we finally have made our text dot signage hit. So there are now signs on the interstate that point people there. And one of the complications of being so late to this party is that there has been a state park in the town of San Felipe that's existed for a number of decades. And so it also was named for Stephen F. Austin. It has an association to this history. So Stephen F. Austin State Park sits a mile from the gate to our historic site. And the state park has always had signage, or since it existed. That certainly has confused some of our visitors. After the initial transfer of sites, there was some confusion about how the sites matriculated to that list to then be put on the construction planning for text dot signage. And ultimately, for a number of reasons, that sign held off, or signs on both sides of the freeway, until they recently did some I-10 improvements. So you drive I-10 all the time. When I say improvements, you probably ask me, what is he talking about? Well, the little stretch right in front of the town of San Felipe has been completed. On either side of us, you're still going to be dealing with a lot of construction issues. But when they completed the construction right there in our little stretch, there was highway signage installed for the town, for the historic site. We're working with the town government, the county government, and the local text dot office to improve the directional signage from I-10 once you get off. How do we clarify for you that you're driving towards both a state park and a state historic site? It works out real nicely. You drive 2 miles and then you go left or you go right. You go left to the state park and right to see us. So it's coming.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Dr. Krim?
Who did your beautiful book for you?
So that's an in-house publication at most of our sites. Sorry, I didn't realize I turned it off. That's an in-house publication that our
Wow.
communications and marketing team oversaw. Obviously, we work with some type of a consultant, and in this case, one of our long-standing project historian consultants, Michael Moore, who was in one of the slides that I showed you. If you know Michael, he was one of our exhibit consultants too. He did all the running on determining the images we wanted to use that are not in our collection, so the number of things that are cited in there. And then we did in-house photography with our communications team, and the design work was done in-house. Most of our sites either have a guidebook or in the process of developing one. So this is an important part of sort of extending the visitor experience. We tell our visitors this is the best-selling book in our gift shop. We tell visitors it's a way to take some of your memories home and remind yourself of the experience here.
You say other sites? The THC is doing books for other sites?
Excuse me. No, yeah.
So each of the state historic sites managed by the Texas Historical Commission either has a guidebook or likely has one in planning. So it's very much a site-focused experience.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's, I'd like the record to show that when we first talked about doing a brochure, talking about tech, this is what we were thinking of. So we need something like the THC does, because THC does a really good job
Charles,
at
get a
it.
copy of this. This is, I want this.
Yeah, then when I'm talking about reformatting and making it look slick, that's what I had
Yes.
in mind.
I've got one. And I
Absolutely.
thought I gave you one that night, but we'll set you up.
Other questions? Sherry, you got anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I
This is
appreciate it.
great. Great presentation.
All right, we're going to now call Adrian Barker from the Historic George Ranch Association. We're keeping it down on the coast.
I'm Adrienne Barker. I'm with the George Ranch. I am the Executive Director of the Historic George Ranch Association. Just a little background on myself. I am not a historian as well. Others have said that. I'm probably even the least historian in the room. I have a background in nonprofit management at executive levels and fundraising development. I moved to the museum world in, oh gosh, about 14 years ago, went to work for the Houston Museum of Natural Science and was the director of the Sugar Land Museum for 9 years when it was a new facility. It was about 18 months old and charged with growing it. And so stayed there 9 years. We grew to about 100,000 visitors a year, completed a renovation of one of our exhibit halls, and then the pandemic hit. And so kind of museums closed, kind of hanging out at home, and had an opportunity to go to work for the George Foundation in Fort Bend County. And if you're not familiar with the George Foundation, we are a 79-year-old foundation that's focused on Fort Bend County, funding projects there. We fund $30 to $40 million a year in gifts to the community for primarily, everything, you name it. Everything, basic needs to projects in the schools, all sorts of things. So when I went to work for the George Foundation, stepped into a situation, you may know us as the George Ranch Historical Park. We were founded about 35 years ago in conjunction with the Fort Bend History Association, formed a joint project there. And the ranch, the education facility is on 500 acres, situated on about the 20,000 acre George Ranch on the west side of the Brazos River in Fort Bend County. And when I came on board, the idea was to be a liaison between the George Foundation and the Fort Bend History Association in an effort to increase the profile of the George Ranch Historical Park and kind of get things back on track from a business standpoint. Prior to the pandemic, finances were not in great shape. There had been layoffs, different challenges, things like that. And we needed to get back on track. The greatest thing about my job was that it's an unbelievable resource, an unbelievable piece of 500 acres, unbelievable facilities there. And so if you've got that, you can take it, grow it. You know, if you don't have anything, if you've got 500 acres with nothing on it and you don't have any financial backing and you don't have a George Foundation giving you part of your funding, yeah, not a very fun job. Luckily, those pieces are there. And you referenced the Summerlee Foundation. Very good point. Pretty much, if you want to be successful, you have to have some sort of fairly regular stream of revenue to support your historic site. So we're a little different. We're not THC. We're not state funded. About half of our funding comes from the George Foundation, and the rest of it is generated revenue through visitorship and other community gifts from Summerlee, things like that. We also have the George Foundation has a collection that was developed in the early days of the George Ranch Historical Park. We have a good number of family pieces that are in 2 historic museum type homes. And then we have a lot of other pieces that were acquired a little bit on a shopping spree way back in the 80s. And so we have about 20,000 pieces in the collection. Historic George Ranch Association manages that for the George Foundation in a facility on the ranch. And so we have some folks on our staff that have collections background, and they work with the pieces. One of our challenges is we've got a lot of great things in, it's an old Quonset building. For those of you who know what a Quonset building is, got a lot of great things in there. And we've kind of had a collection theory in the past of, you know, great, we got this piece, we've got it cataloged, we're going to keep it in the building. And our trustees are kind of like, okay, let's get it out. Let's get it out of the building into our facility. We're not necessarily into loaning to a lot of other places because it's not a terribly in and out collection, but we're moving much more rapidly to get things out into the ranch, as we call it, for our visitors to see. So we're a little bit different. I've loved hearing all the history today and everybody's stories. We use the story of one Texas family to teach 100 years of Texas history. So we go through 4 generations of a family. The first, they were Stephen F. Austin, first 300 in Fort Bend, the Jones family. But our family was just kind of a regular family. There were not books written about Henry Jones. There were fires. We don't have any of his well, we're not even sure that he was literate. There were no writings from him. Polly Ryan was our second generation. Some of you may know her name, and her house also burned at the home place. So unfortunately, I'm very jealous when I see all these writings. I'm like, oh, that'd be so great. I think ours burned up. So, but our job there is not really to tell the story of the family and what they did. It's to use the progression of time to teach kids about what it was like to come to Texas in 1824. We're 200 years old today. And we like to say we're older than Texas, which is kind of a fun thing to say, and it's true. So we use that story to teach kids how life changed over 100 years. And when you look at the dog trot cabin to the old prairie home, to the Victorian mansion, all the way to the ranch house that's set in 1930, they see a vast difference in how people's lives changed. And we think that's the important thing that we teach in terms of history. So we use that story. We talk about those 4 generations, but it's really not about them. It's really about Texas and what happened over those 100 years as Texas grew and developed. So we do have the 4 sites I just mentioned. In addition to that, we do have a blacksmith shop. We have a rail car. We have a sharecropper cabin where we interpret African-American history. But the thing that sets us apart, we think, from other historic sites is that we have cowboys on horses with longhorns. And this is a heritage longhorn herd. Our cowboys are on horseback every day. They're out sorting and roping and running cattle through the dipping vat for every student that comes through to visit, or every person from the public. So we don't think if anybody wants to contradict me, I will be contradicted, because we don't think there is any other historic site in Texas that actually has cowboys on horseback, herding, cutting every day. So if they do, tell me. I know there's Fort Griffin has the longhorns, Fort Worth does have the longhorns that go down the street, but we don't think there's any set up quite like us. So we're very excited for that to be shown to our visitors.
If I were to guess, it would be, what's up in Canyon?
Ranching, ranching heritage, or
But it's a
at
Canyon, it's
yeah,
the
I know.
Texas musical, and it's the music.
well,
But
yeah,
that, the Good Night Ranch and
Polladura State Park, is that what you're?
maybe so.
yeah, I'll look into
I'm
that.
just look it up. I don't know.
I'll
I'm
look
not
into
saying
that, 'cause I
that's the
have not
case.
checked that one out. I've checked out others in West Texas. That's a good point. So our focus used to be kind of history for everyone, and we focus very much on history lovers and history buffs. We have found that focusing on that audience is not significant enough to support us. We have to bring people to us who don't know they like history, and we have to bring them there for some reason and then have them discover history while they're there. And so that's been our focus for the last several years. In addition, the George Foundation went through a strategic planning process and really determined that our mission of everybody to, anybody that wants to come in any time of day, it could be French tourists, it could be somebody on a corporate trip, it could be kids, it could be whatever. That really didn't fit the mission of the George Foundation, which is focused on Fort Bend County. And so even at one time, marketing was taking place on international air flights for the George Ranch Historical Park, because the marketing effort was to attract foreign visitors, which, okay, that's laudable. But that's not really what the George Foundation is about. And if they were going to significantly support this facility and maintain it, they felt it needed to come back a little closer to their mission. And so we went to a structure of school visits Tuesday through Friday, school field trips only, and Saturday is for our public visitors. When school's not in session, we're open to the public. Anytime school is in session, Tuesday through Friday, it's kids only. That allows our educators, and yes, our folks are interpreters, but they're really educators. That allows them to be focused on students and Texas history, or the topic they're teaching, without having, in the midst of a class, and they have 4 French tourists walk up. What do you don't want to be rude to the 4 French tourists, but what do you do with these 25 kids? You're teaching a class, gone to Texas or thriving in Texas. How do you do that? So we've been very pleased the last 5 years to adopt that focus and stick with that focus. It allows our educators to really hone in on what they need to do and what they need to teach. So you can guess we're about students. We have anywhere from 25 to 30,000 students a year visit the George Ranch. We think that's going to be even higher this year because of some things I'll mention in a minute. We reach about 10 to 15,000 people beyond that who come as families or individuals on our public days. And I will say this, I know it's been alluded to when you were talking about numbers and counts. That's one body, one person. I'm kind of a purist. If they come in and they tour the ranch and they take a class, that's still one person. So I don't count that as two. And I know in the museum world, it's all over the place. And some of y'all are like, oh, you went in this house, so that's one. And you went in this house, that's two. And no, you're still one person. So the 25 to 30,000 kids, that's one kid who came to visit us, and the 10 to 15,000 public visitors, that's one person each. I'm just a purist. In addition to teaching history, which we're very pleased with, we also teach courses in agriculture. We have Texas students now who have to choose an academic designation when they get to high school, and agriculture is one of those designations. And you would think, okay, well, that's the 4-H kids. Well, guess what? No, it's the kid that doesn't know what they want to do, and they go, ag, that sounds fun, that's animals, I'll choose that. And they've never seen an animal past a dog or a cat. So we have formed a partnership with the 2 largest districts in our county to dedicate days to agriculture education. And those kids on the ag track come, and that's all they hear about. They hear about horses, cows, pigs, all this sort of thing. Now, the fun thing is that we go back and we introduce some of the historic agriculture pieces and feeding methods and those sorts of things, the dipping vat. So we still weave, as I said, we weave in that history. So even if those kids, and trust me, when you're talking to junior high and high school kids, you got to be very entertaining and catch their attention. So we don't tell them they're coming to learn about history. We say they're coming to learn about horses or pigs or chickens, and they get a little more excited. And then we weave in the history so that maybe something will spark that imagination in them, and they'll become history buffs, or at least interested in learning more about history. One of the things that we do is some of the new things that we're doing, we have a brand new visitor center that we opened in March. We had an old visitor center that flooded 3 times, and finally decided after the 3rd time it was probably not a good thing to muck out and rebuild. So we went uphill a little bit and we opened a new 8,000 square foot, I would say state of the art. It's a nice building for visitors to funnel through. Now we have the advantage, and this is very much like some of the other locations as well. Our story is out on the ranch. It's not in the building, but we do have 2 halls. We talk about the history of the ranch and how the family made money and how they sustained it to form the George Foundation. And then we do have a review of the family history of the 4 generations so that they can get an overview before they go out, go see it, see people in person, then come back in if they need a refresher. And we do have interactive pieces on both sides. So we're very pleased to be out of the flooding and out of the temporary building and into our new visitor center. We're getting ready to add some pretty cool things. We, back in the day, the Georges, who was our 4th generation, they had sheep. Sheep are not terribly common to our area of Texas, but we're going to bring sheep back. We're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to have Shetland sheep, so they're not quite so big, because they're not sheep around here much, but sheep are big. And we think real sheep are not good with little kids. So we're going to have Shetland sheep. They will be able to, they'll be halter trained. Also, Shetland sheep are interesting. They don't have to be sheared. The hair is removed by what's called ruing. The hair follicles have to actually break off and the hair pulls off. So our students will be able to come in and pull and rue the sheep and feed the sheep. We're also going to bring back baby chicks. We have chickens on the ranch. We have roosters, but we're going to bring back baby chicks and all the hatching and all that sort of thing. So we're really trying to, again, capture the imagination of students and children and weave history into it so that then they go to all these great sites and really, really get excited and deep into history. Well, we got to catch them somewhere. Some of the things that we've done on our journey, About a year and a half ago, we decided that we needed a new management structure. And so we ended the relationship with the Fort Bend History Association, formed a new 501c3, and it is guided by a local board. And our mission is only focused on the 500-acre education facility at the George Ranch. We rebranded as the George Ranch. Very happy to say that for the last 3 years, we've been in the black. We have reserves rebuilt. We have restructured our staff. We have hired new staff. We have increased training. We've gone to visit some of the sites. We took a field trip to San Felipe this year during our August shutdown when it's too hot to be open. We formed relationship with local organizations. Fort Bend Junior Service League is now a volunteer placement for us. We're seeking adult volunteers. We've come a long way in 4 years. We're very proud of what we've done. I do want to talk a little about some of the classes that we offer, and I think if I can get to that page, there we go. Just so you can see the classes that we emphasize, they're all TEKS aligned. We do Revolutionary Texas, Golden Age of the Cattle Drive, Life in Early Texas, Native Americans. We then move into Reconstruction era Texas, the closing of the prairie. We talk about Texas during World War II. We hit the Dust Bowl, although I will say climate conditions in Fort Bend County were much worse the first half of 1920s than during the Dust Bowl, but we talk about the Dust Bowl's effect. Ranching heritage, which is basically our cowboys, and then agriculture. About 75% of the students who visit us have a class. And by class, we mean that there is lecture and hands-on activities, and it is structured. So it's not just free for all running around doing whatever they want to on self-guide. And even self-guided tours have a schedule that they follow. We've found that teachers and students like that and parents like that a lot better than just running crazy. So we have tried to make that as structured as we can. I didn't bring a lot of other pictures, but I did bring these. We also do Frontier Days, which has moved to November, I'm glad to say, because we would have had your date traditionally. You can see we do a great Easter egg hunt. We do a lot with the Black Cowboy Heritage Student Education Day. Black cowboys are a huge influence on our ranch, and so we have a day dedicated to education for students in that regard. We also have a fabulous pumpkin display, and I'm happy to say the 18-wheeler from Floydada pulled in today. So we got pumpkins, and we'll be putting those out. We don't sell them. It's only for looks. But one thing that we do in our programming is that if we have Frontier Days, which is a public event on Saturday, we have a student day on Friday. And same thing with the Black Student Education Day. Almost everything we do has a student day and a public day if we're having a public event. Our student days have anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 students. And then our Saturdays, our Frontier Days usually has 1,500 to 2,000 public visitors. One last fun thing that we've gotten involved with, and we did our first day yesterday, it was crazy. We're all about students. We're all about supporting students. We had one of the high school cross-country teams last year training at the ranch in the education facility. We've had proms in the arena. Anything we can do to support students, that's what we do. And again, if we can get them there, maybe we can show them history, they'll get hooked. But one thing that's popped up in Fort Bend County and Lamar Consolidated ISD is a program they're calling Innovative Learning Days. And they're concerned about their teacher well-being and burnout. And so they are structuring in multiple days per month when the teachers are in class but do not have students. And as Dr. Nivens, the superintendent, explained in a committee that I'm in, he said, now this is not a day for kids to sit in the cafeteria and be on their phones. Now, doesn't have to be super educational, does not have to be exactly what they're learning in class, but we need these kids, we need to find something for these kids to do while the teachers are doing planning that's educational, that maybe they'll learn something, and not in the classroom. Give those teachers a break. They're not sitting in the cafeteria. And I'm sitting in the meeting going, pick us, we're the perfect place. We can have 1,000 kids a day. So we yesterday had 400 kids from Lamar High School and Lamar Consolidated ISD come for the first Innovative Learning Day. We're learning, we're all learning. School districts are learning, we're learning. They hit us for about an hour, which was crazy because, we're like a 4-hour experience. But we had 400 kids, 12 school buses. They all rolled in. We got them split into groups. We got them out into the ranch. I think they each hit maybe one place. They walked around a lot. And, but it met their goals, got the kids out of school. They were with a bunch of coaches, I think. I think that's who their team leaders were. We were happy because we got the kids, we got them outdoors. We got them to see some things they hadn't seen before, and had many of the teachers or the coaches say, can we come back on Saturday? And the nice thing is, through the George Foundation and a very generous grant from them, students are free and teachers are free always at our facility. So we're very excited. We got one under our belt and we have many more scheduled during the year. We're learning, LCISD is learning. We're hoping they're going to give us more than an hour because that's not much time. But I think you can see we're doing a lot of things to be innovative in trying to expose students and the public to Texas history, give them a feel for what it was like to be in Texas 200 years ago and what it's like to be in Texas today. That's it.
Great,
Questions?
thank you.
Yeah.
Questions about George Ranch and the great things going on down there?
The docent situation. Y'all don't have a college nearby. Y'all don't have Berkey and
I know.
SFA. And so how do you do it? What do you
Volunteers
do?
are so hard. I come out of nonprofit organizations, American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, others where we were totally volunteer dependent. You can't raise $1 million in a heart ball with one staff person. Some staff, interestingly, in nonprofits are not as adept or used to dealing with volunteers. And so unfortunately, what I have found through the years in our site is that we had no adult volunteers when I got there. We had 2 cowboys. We have 2 volunteer cowboys of all things. Yeah, we can't get docents, but we can get 2 guys to come out and ride horse and they're good at it. So we are diligently working to rebuild that. And I've just had a series of meetings with our volunteer coordinator to talk about go to Del Webb. We've got 2 Del Webbs in Fort Bend County. Go to retired teachers, build a relationship with the high school, which is George Ranch High School, which was on ranch property, all those sorts of things. So in a fast growing, almost urban county, it's tough. We don't have the little old ladies anymore. So we are looking, and we'll have success. We're growing it a little bit. Service League is helping us out, and we're finding different groups like that. But yeah, we don't have an automatic audience for volunteers.
Hard.
Other questions?
We're very different.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's something entirely different, but also very related.
Very different. And I
It-
believe we can start.
Next up, we're going to have Scott McMahon from La Bahia. Tell us about what's going on down there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for having us here today. On behalf of all of us, I know we all appreciate it. I appreciate being asked to come out and visit with y'all today about Presidio La Bahia and our complex there that we operate under the Texas Historical Commission. My name is Scott McMahon. I have been with the Presidio in February. It will be 11 years. I was with Parks and Wildlife at Washington on the Brazos for about 8 before that. And then about 15 years before that, I had been volunteering at various historic sites across Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas and into Louisiana, playing at the history hobby. So get started. And Amy was talking about, she didn't want to talk, or she wasn't talking about the history of San Jacinto. I'm going to tell you about the history of our three sites that we operate today in Goliad. Presidio La Vigia State Historic Site Complex was owned and operated by the Catholic Diocese of Victoria for nearly 50 years. Prior to the Diocese of Victoria, there was a Diocese of Corpus Christi. They broke that away in 82 and formed the Diocese of Victoria. And it has owned and operated the Presidio since then. And our Bishop Cahill is very fond of letting everyone know he is the only bishop in North America to own his own fort. So it is still an active Catholic church and still very much a part of the diocese and the community there. In December of 22, the Texas Historic Commission took over management of Presidio La Vigia, worked out an agreement with the diocese to take over management and start the operation of the fort, and has been doing so since then. With that management, the Presidio was rolled into a complex with Fannin Battleground State Historic Site and Lepontet State Historic Site. And they were all consolidated under the same management. So we operate basically the Goliad campaign of 1835 and 36. We operate all those historic sites. All three sites are tied together through the Goliad campaign and the part that they all played in the Texian War for Independence. And then there is also a smaller thread that ties these sites together through the Spanish colonial period and the filibustering era of early Texas. Presidio La Vigia State Historic Site was founded at its current location in 1749, and it supported the local missions of Nuestra Senora and Mission Rosario, which are there in Goliad, and it also supported Mission Refugio, which is just down the road about 20 some odd miles south of us. During the Mexican War for Independence, the Presidio was home to the Republican forces under Gutierrez and McGee. They were there for 4 months. The Spanish army laid siege to the fort for 4 months and eventually broke off their siege and retreated back to San Antonio. And we kind of like to talk about the fact that siege was about 9 times longer than the one at the Alamo. So there was a lot of military action going on there, and that played out throughout the 18 teens and into the early 1820s. The Presidio also was the heart of the community of La Vigia. The community of La Vigia grew up around the walls of the Presidio. There was an entire town that was built literally just across the street from the walls. It was so close that in the 1820s, when one of the filibustering expeditions took over the fort, people were able to stand on the roofs of their house and fire into the fort on the men that were inside the walls. So the town really grew up right around it. In early October of 1835, Texian forces marched from Victoria, Texas, right on down the road, crossed the river, and they took over the fort. They captured it from the Mexican army and operated it throughout the duration of the well, not completely throughout the remainder of the Texas Revolution, but for several months afterwards. One of the big things that we talk about at the Presidio is the Goliad Massacre that took place in March of 1836. Around 340 some odd men lost their lives at that point. And the Mexican army then marched on towards San Jacinto. The Texian army under Sam Houston caught up with them at the Battle of San Jacinto. And one of the rallying cries that was given during the battle was, of course, remember the Alamo, and the other one was remember La Vigia. Today it's come down to us as remember Goliad, but it was actually remember La Vigia. After that, the fort fell into ruins, and the 19th century saw the end of the fort as a historic focus for military units coming into Texas, and the walls started to fall down. The only thing it was kept up with was Our Lady of Loreto Chapel, which, as I said, was used almost continuously from the time it was completed in 1779 through to today. Fannin Battleground is also one of our sites. As the name implies, it was the battleground where Colonel Fannin fought General Urrea in 1836. The site was, or his men were surrounded and attacked by the Mexican army there. There was a battle throughout the day. The following day, the Texians realized that they were not going to be able to make it out, and they surrendered to General Urrea. The men that were there that were able to were marched back to the fort. Those that were unable to be marched were left and were retrieved at a later date. And the men that were killed in the battle were buried in the Texian trenches that they had used for defenses during that battle. The site of the battle was marked by a Texian survivor with a pile of rocks, which was replaced in 1891 with a iron gin screw. So if you've ever been to the battlefield today, and you can't see it in this picture, but there's a big giant iron contraption sticking out of the ground, that's what remains of the gin screw. And we think that's the center of Fannin Square at the Battle of Coletta Creek. 1913, the land was donated to create a park commemorating the historic event. And in 1965, that property was transferred to Parks and Wildlife, who eventually transferred it in 2008 to the Texas Historic Commission. And we've been operating it ever since that time. And finally, this is the site that no one's ever heard of, LePont Lawn State Historic Site. It was initially a Lepon Apache Indian village in the general area. It's today, it's out in the middle of the brush. Some of my colleagues refer to it as the parking lot site because that's pretty much all that's there today. But it was a Lepon Apache village, and at some point there was supposed to have been a Spanish presidio there. I don't know if that's actually accurate or not, but there is evidence that there might have been one there. But by the early 1830s, the Mexican army moved into the area and they built a fortification there. And it was an earthwork fortification with stockade walls. One of the Texians that was there in 1835 described it as a second-rate hog pen. So it wasn't much of a structure. The structure, when the site was donated to the state, the structure was was bulldozed and leveled out to make a nice, smooth park area. So any remnants of it have been lost to time. Not only was it active during the Texas Revolution, but in the Federalist Wars in 1840, there were Federalist troops that were there. If you're not familiar with the Federalist Wars, it was basically kind of an ongoing run of the Texas Revolution. There were villages across the Rio Grande Valley that wanted to separate from a centralist government. They wanted to have a federalist form of government, so they declared their independence. There was a lot of back and forth between that area and San Antonio. This site was used as a fort around that time as well. And then in 1842, there was a battle there. In July of 1842, Texian forces under General Davis battled with General Canales. And that was the last time that the site was actually used as a military fortification. In 1937, the site was donated to Parks and Wildlife, and in 2019, it was transferred to the Texas Historical Commission. Today, the Presidio is operated by the Texas Historic Commission as a complex. The sites, obviously, that we just talked about are part of that complex. They make up the Texian campaign story for the Goliad campaign. We have 7 staff members. Prior to the Texas Historic Commission taking over the site, there were 2 staff members. Myself was the only full-time person, and we had another part-time person that would be working. So I did maintenance, retail, interpretation, the whole 9 yards. So I'm very happy that that the agency is now managing the site. Our annual visitation averages around 21,000 up to 22,000. We recently did a feasibility study, and we think 22 to 24,000 is as much as we can fit in with the traffic that's in the area, the population, that sort of thing. So we're not too far off of that mark. Approximately 1,800 4th and 7th grade Texas history students visited the Presidio in the last year. One of the things that we do, we have school tours throughout the duration of the school season from September through May. But one of the things that we do in March, April, and May is we offer a grant program. So for 4th and 7th grade history classes, they come out. Admission is free. We cover a mileage stipend, and they get exposed to Texas history. And the history that we talk about there is we like to talk about the 9 flags that flew over Goliad. We talk about the Spanish period all the way up through the restoration that took place in the 60s. We offer special programs monthly at the Presidio. In the summertime, in the months of June and July, we offer a program every Wednesday. It's geared towards kids while they're out of school for the summer. A lot of it is hands-on activities where we'll be making a piece of equipment that was used historically at the Presidio, so in a uniform, showing some sort of a demonstration that we can get the kids involved with. They have a good time. They learn things they don't realize they're learning. And it's great for everybody all the way around. And we have a lot of repeat visitation on an annual basis, but also throughout that season. We'll have grandparents that'll bring out kids, different sets of grandkids throughout those 2 months. We'll have people that'll come down to see specific things that we offer. So there's a lot of focus on that. We have quarterly programs that we're implementing at Phantom Battleground. So we're trying to bring some focus to that site. It's not as isolated as Lipantetlan, but it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So we're trying to bring more focus to that site, do things over there. Our big period that we really focus on for our history is Spanish colonial up through the end of the Revolution, early Republic statehood era. And then somebody had mentioned earlier partnerships. We do work with a lot of other historic sites, sister sites specifically within the agency, but historic sites across the state. And one of the things that we're involved with coming up this month is on October 19th, it's Camino Real de los Tejas Trail Day. And so we're working with the trailway system to focus on the site, the part that it played in the traffic and movement that moved up and down or traveled up and down the Camino. Future projects. We are currently in the midst of working on an interpretive master plan. The site did not have one prior to coming on board with the agency, and that's one of the things we want to get set up, have our ducks in a row and line up the history that we want to present there that's important to the site. We're working with Gallagher and Associates, who are involved with the Alamo and tons of other Texas historic sites across the state. And Dr. Winters is actually one of our historians that's working on that with us. So we're really excited about that. We are right around 60 years old with the restoration, and a lot of our facilities are in bad need of repair. So we are starting a project. We're supposed to have started this month, but got bumped back a little bit. We're starting in March. Renovation on our restrooms so that our visitors have up-to-date facilities to use. We are working on repairs to the historic pavilion that was built back in the 30s out at Phantom Battleground. We want to preserve the structures that are there, so we're using the same materials that was used in the 30s, and we had to track down cypress, all that kind of good stuff. We're getting repairs made on those sort of things where people are coming out to see the site. We are also working on a research-based program to bring to life a particular unit of Texians that was at the Presidio and were at Phantom Battleground, the Kentucky Mustangs. They came out of Bardstown, Kentucky, marched on down to Texas. One of their figures, a fellow by the name of Duvall, wrote an account of what was going on their trip down. We've based a small recreation of the unit on research that came out of, excuse me, the archives. It's going to be a living history unit that'll focus on what those guys did in the Texas Revolution. And then finally, obviously, y'all are all aware of this, and I'm very excited about it. We have the bicentennial of the Texas Revolution coming up, Texas Independence. And so we are working at Presidio La Vigia to put together a long-term plan of programming, educational and interpretive programming to highlight the part that the Presidio played in not only just the revolution in general, that short period from the fall of 35 to the spring of 36, but in the years that led up to that. And we're doing that with a research-based focus. We've got the Ayuntamiento minutes from Goliad that tell us about what was going on leading up to that. We've got a lot of period firsthand accounts of what was going on during that time. And so we're trying to use that to create focuses for the years and the months leading up to that big celebration. And I'm trying to keep us kind of back on track with timing. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up and ask if anybody has any questions. And if you do, I'd love to answer them. If I've got the answer, I will happily share it with you. If I don't, I would make it up, but I was told I'm not supposed to do that today, so I'll refrain from making up answers.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
Questions?
I have questions, of course.
Yes, ma'am.
I took my students to Goliad many, many years ago, Amy, Derek, and we did a reenactment, and you all we're doing reenactments, even the massacre and everything. Are you not doing those
Yes,
anymore?
ma'am, we still do that.
Oh.
It's done annually, the last weekend in March.
Right.
I'm trying to direct our focus to a more educational program that tells the history a little bit better. One of my new staff members has come in and he'd been, some guys had talked to him about the program. They said, you're going to see a reenactment of a reenactment. And that's what this event's become. It's gone on for nearly 40 years now. And Derek was talking earlier about the stories that have come up with, you know, over the years here at the museum and artifacts and where they come from. We kind of have the same thing with the reenactment. So we still do it. I'm trying to draw that focus in and give a better background and a little bit more of an educational focus on it. But we still do that program. That is the only big reenactment we do a year. Now, we have people in period clothing for living history demonstrations off and on throughout the year, but we also offer programming with authors and historians and things like that also cover that story.
I have learned through my years in the business that more people like cats than history.
Mhm.
Y'all just lost a cat.
We did.
And the fact that I know that is pretty bizarre, but y'all lost Ash.
What?
We did. He was not nearly as famous as Cece or Bella at the Alamo.
Alamo, yeah,
but
sure.
but he was very much a little icon for us there at Presidio. You know,
What
it
got-
happens. I don't know. It was just an unfortunate thing that he passed. So.
Life number 10.
Yeah.
You only get 9. Yeah, I thought it was ironic that the cat at the La Bahia was named Ash,
Mhm.
given what happened.
He got that name before he came to us, but I did point that out to the staff and they said we should go ahead and keep it. The cat that's at the Alamo right now, Bella, came from the Presidio as well.
That's good. There's
Yep.
a lot of cat
Wow.
swapping that goes on with the historic sites, as it turns out.
Heavens.
Other questions? All right, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for that presentation. That's fascinating. Well, one more question for you later. If you had half of her appropriation. What could you do? Yeah, what could you do?
Well, I'd get in trouble with her, first of all.
What,
But there's a lot we could do. I would like to see the restoration of the Presidio when it was done back in the 60s, restored the site to the 1836 footprint.
Sure.
Most of our visitors wouldn't know the difference between the 36 footprint and back to the 1790s. There's a few differences, but I would like to see the Presidio walls plastered and whitewashed like they were historically. It would be nice to be able to reconstruct some of the via of La Bahia around the Presidio to show the relationship that the fort had with the community.
Yeah.
And really just to kind of flesh it out with
I'm
more-
doing the
more
math in my
props and
head on
things.
that. That's not nearly that much. I mean, you need about a $50,000 appropriation and you got a lot of good going.
yeah.
All right, interesting. I think that's one of the neglected, in my opinion, it's one of the neglected sites in the Texas Revolution pantheon. And so maybe there'll be an appropriation for you guys too.
Hopefully.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is our last scheduled speaker. And this is going to be an overview of Washington on the Brazos.
Thank you.
Jonathan Failer is in the driver's seat for the last presentation. Then after this, we'll have
Mhm.
public testimony.
Yeah, and then you get your.
Right, and we're gonna say goodbye to one of our committee members at 4. So don't take offense if somebody.
Oh,
gets
no,
up and leaves.
no problem. I'm batting cleanup, so I'll try to hit a home run and make it quick. I've presented you with the slide outlines and then also a passport that we created in-house to drive visitation between our Revolution and Republic THC sites. So hopefully we'll see you at our sites. My name is Jonathan Failer. I have the honor of serving as the site manager for the Republic of Texas complex, which includes Washington on the Brazos, the Star of the Republic Museum, Barrington Plantation, and Fanthorpe Inn State Historic Sites. Certainly an honor to follow my colleagues and friends in the field as we talk about the places that we're passionate to steward. I've been working at Washington on the Brazos in various capacities for little over 12 years now. So quite a while. Let me move my slides. Okay, here we go. I'll drive. So there's the sites that we supervise, and just a very brief site history. Our documented history goes back to 1690 with the La Bahia Road cutting right through our property, which later becomes Ferry Street in the town of Washington. Obviously, we're very well known for March the 2nd and the Convention of 1836. And in some ways, we've pigeonholed ourselves into that story. And we're working to build ourselves out of that story a little bit, or broadening our story, because in 1842, Washington became the capital of the Republic. This is the home of the Republic government. It's where the 7th, 8th, and 9th Texas Congress met. It's where the early discussions of annexation took place. So we are excited to be able to position ourselves in a way to tell that story like we never have before. In 1900, the first permanent placement of a monument recognizing the significance of the site took place. We became publicly protected land in 1916 and became Washington State Park in 1923. The Texas Centennial kicked off at Washington on the Brazos in 1936. And in that same year, we brought in the President Anson Jones home to be preserved from 5 miles away. In 1970, the Star of the Republic Museum opened. It was operated by Blinn College. In 1983, Fanthorpe Inn opened to the public after being purchased in 1979. And then in 2019, a very pivotal year for us, is the year that we transferred from Texas Parks and Wildlife to the Texas Historical Commission, making our entire site for the first time in its over 100-year history managed by one single agency, which I think is really important. We go from a patchwork quilt to whole cloth. So just briefly about the sites that we manage, the Washington on the Brazos is the location of the original town of Washington, most known for its role in the Texas Revolution, as the site where Texas Declaration of Independence was passed on March the 2nd, as well as the 17-day convention surrounding that event. It is a preserved archaeological site. On it, we have currently a replica structure built in 1969 by noted Texas architect Rayford Stripling. The La Bahia Road is preserved through our property. We have a historic ferry crossing where it crossed the Brazos River. We have the La Bahia pecan. If you're not familiar with the La Bahia pecan, is a noted famous Texas tree. Has been researched and studied by Texas A&M University. It's propagated. Every freshman senator gets a seedling from the La Bahia pecan. So it's a tree that we're very proud of, and it weathered Hurricane Beryl fairly well. So we were glad for that. We offer daily tours, weekend programming, living history, educational programs, and special events at Washington on the Brazos. The Star of the Republic Museum opened in 1970. Was created by an act of the Texas legislature and constructed in 1969. It opened on March the 1st, 1970, and was operated by Blinn College up until 2019. It was built to be a star upon a star and serves as the only museum dedicated to the 10 years that Texas stood as an independent republic. Our collections we have around 9,000 objects in our collections. It is a spectrum of material culture from the Republic of Texas and early statehood eras. It is a classic material culture collection and holds unique representative furnishings, textiles, tools, archives, maps, and from a life of early Texas. Currently, it is closed for renovation, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Barrington Plantation. Barrington Plantation in its current format serves as a full-time living history site. So it's open 5 days a week. We have 7 staff members who work on that farm, bringing the site to life every single day the site is open. Of course, it's the home of Dr. Anson Jones, built in 1844, and his recreated farm and outbuildings. The house was moved from its original location 5 miles away in 1936 to be preserved for the Texas Centennial. It has since moved twice within the park in its history. Through the writings, ledgers, and account books of Dr. Jones, the staff at Barrington attempt to recreate as much of his agricultural and domestic endeavors as possible. One of the things that we really believe at Barrington and really throughout the complex is that preserving the things is important. Preserving the knowledge on how the things work is also just as important. If you don't know how it works or you don't know how to use it, it doesn't really matter much. It's just a thing. We also raise and preserve living things, heritage breeds of livestock and heirloom seeds that are on the verge of extinction. And yes, there are endangered breeds of livestock that go extinct, and when they're gone forever. And unlike wildlife, where you have to preserve their habitats and you have to not use them, you have to control how they're hunted, heritage livestock is different. They go extinct because we stop using them. So we continue to raise heritage breeds of livestock that are typical for the time period that Dr. Anson Jones would have had on his property, and we use them. We butcher our chickens. We slaughter pigs every year. We use our smokehouse, and that's the value. Kids don't know where food comes from. Kids think it comes wrapped in plastic. Come to Barrington on a January Saturday and watch us butcher pigs and learn how people did it historically. And we're not that far removed from those events. I mean, our grandparents did that kind of stuff. So that's something that we really value at Barrington. Fanthorpe Inn is located in Anderson. It's the only part of our complex that is not within our 300 acres in Washington County. It's 19 miles away from Washington on the Brazos. It is one of the best preserved stagecoach inns in all of Texas. It has had 2 owners in its life. The Fanthorpe family and its descendants, and the state of Texas. The state purchased the inn from Fanthorpe descendants in 1979 and opened the inn in 1983 as a public historic site. It is interpreted to its currently it's interpreted to its 1850s version, but underneath is the original home of Henry and Rachel Fanthorpe, a 1-story dog trot log cabin built in 1834. Fanthorpe is an outstanding glimpse into what travel and life was like in early Texas. We offer coach rides on select Saturdays. You're probably the only place in Texas you can get a horse-drawn coach ride throughout the year, and is open Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. We just completed $1 million preservation project on that facility. So we're very excited about that. And just digging into the weeds a little bit. So we have 24 staff members. 23 of them are full-time that operate the site, everything from administration to programming, interpretation, education, retail, customer service, exhibits and collections, and maintenance. We average about 85,000 visitors to our grounds each year. Of course, we had a downturn during COVID, but those numbers are coming back. We offer nearly 1,000 programs to visitors throughout the year, everything from family programming, living history, homeschool days, education programs, guided tours, and special events. We typically deliver about 500 education programs each year to anywhere between 4,000 and 7,000 students. We are also supported, I think it's important to note, by our operations are supported by the Washington on the Brazos Historical Foundation. They're a 501c3 Friends organization that has been operating and supporting Washington on the Brazos since 1946. So what's coming on the horizon? We began a plan to renovate the site and improve the visitor experience in 2020 with a $54 million renovation project. With an incredible commitment of $44 million from the Texas legislature, the Washington on the Brazos Historical Foundation is currently raising the remaining $10 million. To date, they have raised $8.5 million of that $10 million goal. This is to create much needed updates to the site and really improve that visitor experience. Creating a unified visitor experience across our 300 acres is one of our primary goals, as well as connecting ourselves to our related historic sites, San Jacinto, the Alamo, Presidio La Bahia, and others. So it's going to begin, we'll talk briefly about it, but the Visitor Center was built in 1998, is receiving a complete renovation. So you can see in the top photograph, that's what it looks like now. The other day, I took that photo and a rendering at the bottom there. The Visitor Center will continue to serve as the major orientation space for visitors to our complex. It will also be primary retail and ticketing location. It was built in 1998. It's never seen a renovation. So this will be the first one. The Star of the Republic Museum, again, opened in 1970. It saw its last major exhibit renovation in 2000. So it's been almost 25 years since the exhibits were updated. The building is seeing major updates to its infrastructure, and we are addressing accessibility and life safety needs. Exhibits are being brought into the 21st century, and we're creating a very flexible exhibit space that will allow us to more effectively rotate objects in and out from our extensive collection. So you can see that that's what the museum looks like right now in that top photograph. When we said we were gutting the museum, I didn't quite fully comprehend what it was going to look like. And you walk in there and yeah, it's gutted. The other thing that's happening as part of this renovation project is really a new and exciting experience for our visitors. As part of the renovations will be the Washington Townsite experience that will see 6 new reconstructed exhibit buildings on site that will help tell the story of Washington as it moved from a fledgling town where the Republic was born in 1836 to the capital of a nation in 1842, and then the place where Congress decided to move forward with annexation in 1845. Washington is the best place positioned to tell the story of the Republic of Texas. We're excited to be the place that visitors can really immerse themselves in that story, both on the grounds and on the grounds of the historic site and in the Star of the Republic Museum. A tremendous amount of archaeology took place between 2023 and 2024. More than 200,000 artifacts were recovered, are still being processed today, that are informing the design of our buildings. We're looking at the buildings we're looking at recreating will be the Morris family dwelling, which was a hardscrabble family that moved into town in 1835. Sold the property and in fact actually went and fought at the Battle of the Alamo, and of course did not return, then became the home of William Mockford, a tailor shop in the Republic period. We will rebuild Sam Houston's presidential office. We know quite a bit about that building. We will build Samuel Heath's carpenter shop, who was one of the early town builders from Maine, who hosted the Tejano delegates during the convention of 1836. We will rebuild Hall and Lots Tavern, which was one of the major hubs of information and gathering. Davy Crockett stayed there for 2 nights on his way to the Alamo. So it's a very important structure for the telling of the town. We will rebuild Hatfield's Exchange. Hatfield's Exchange was a 2-story structure, served as a bar on the first floor and a pool hall on the second floor. But when the Republic, when Washington became the capital of the Republic in 42, it became congressional chambers. The House of Representatives met on the second floor. It's where the 8th and 9th Texas Congress met. It's where Anson Jones had a special session of Congress in 1845 looking for guidance on annexation. So it's a very important building. It separates 300 feet and 9 years separate Independence Hall from Hatfield's Exchange, the beginning of the Republic and the end of the Republic. We're very excited to be able to tell that story in a way we've never been able to before. We're also rebuilding Rutgers Drugstore, which is one of the best buildings we have a good 1850s photograph of. So we're very, very excited about what's taking place on the town. This is going to bring Washington to a place of prominence that is long deserved. And this $54 million project is really just something that, as the director of a site, you always hope that you can be in the right place at the right time, and there's certainly an honor to be there. So with that, that's a quick flyby. Any questions?
My head is spinning. Thank you for your presentation.
When do you think all of this, when can we come visit?
Fall of 2025, about a year from
Fall
now.
of 25.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing is all these sites are going to be up and running by the bicentennial of the Texas Declaration of Independence.
Yep.
And not only that, they'll be a little seasoned by then.
We'll have a better idea of how they need to operate by then.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all the shakedown crews will be under your belt by then. Now, are y'all rebuilding buildings sort of like they're doing at Stephen F. Austin?
So yes.
San
So
Felipe?
what is different about what San Felipe did and what we are doing is that San Felipe built on a town lot. Brian, hopefully I'm characterizing this correctly. Built on a lot on the town that was undeveloped.
Okay.
We don't have that luxury, but also our story is so well known that, and the historic road running right through the middle of the town, our stakeholders felt very strongly that if we were going to rebuild any part of the town, it had to be where the town was.
Okay.
That poses a lot of archaeological challenges, preservation challenges, and those are some of the things that we're working on overcoming where there is good integrity with archaeology. We are recreating that structure very nearby or in a place that was already heavily disturbed. Hall and Lots Tavern is a great example. There was good archaeology in that location. Right next to it, the 1923 park residence from when the site became a state park was built right next to it. So we're building the tavern, rebuilding the tavern on that old park residence spot and preserving the archaeology of the original tavern. So we're making some compromises that we feel very comfortable with and our stakeholders do as well.
Question?
Is the Fanthorpe Inn completed?
It is, yes.
Is it open?
It is open. And
Okay.
in fact, we're having a ribbon cutting ceremony on November 15th, but it's open now.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
That's a jewel.
A tremendous site.
Yeah.
Sherry, do you have a question?
No, sir, I'm ready to come see it.
Yeah, no kidding.
We'd love to have you. Thank you.
Jerry's got a question. Hit your mic.
Both for Washington on the Brazos and San Felipe, has anybody thought, you're adjacent to a river. Rivers have meandered at various times. Is that not just out of the blue? I thought, I wonder about that. I mean, is there anybody looked at that and said, we're probably going to be here a while?
That's a great question. So where we see the river move, when we look at historic satellite images, and the river has maintained stability where the town was. And there was Army Corps of Engineer work on the banks of the river. There was a stabilization project in the 80s that is doing a good job. Where we see the river moving is actually a little further downstream, still on our property, but just a little further downstream. The confluence of the Navasota and the Brazos has remained what we think is fairly stable.
On behalf of San Felipe, that's a great question, Commissioner. And during the historic flooding of the Brazos River over the last decade, some of that happened before we went under construction, of course, but we had concerned residents and stakeholders calling to say, are you threatened? Are you going to be underwater? And so if you know anything about the small town, the state park sits in the Brazos River, the river bottoms in the floodplain. And it's had significant issues, including just in the last year, they were closed for a few months because of flooding. Stephen F. Austin chose his town location at a bluff. It's a little silly to act like in flat Texas, we have a real elevation change, but I'm almost 30 feet higher than the state park. And we have had no threats of flooding in any historic way. I think your investment there is a good one. And just as a little exclamation on that, we're going to finish our public archaeology lab in a couple of years where this entire project will be about 15 million. And not to be critical of our friends, I think you get a great bargain at San Felipe at 15 million. So.
Yeah, and I would add that Washington too was built on a high bluff above the river. So I was there during Hurricane Harvey, the tax day floods of 2016. It was either 15 or 16, where I saw the river reach 59 feet in depth at Washington on the Brazos and did not leave its banks. So we're in really good shape.
Yeah, I think you're worried about not only leaving its banks, but cutting a new channel, which is over time. But,
yes, sir.
Good news.
Yeah, I think it's unpredictable, but I think we're okay.
Wonder how long it'd take to canoe that stretch from Washington to San Felipe. That'd be an interesting trip.
Well, never know.
There's a challenge. I just issued a challenge. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, well, I was about to say, if they could run a boat up and down, that'd be cool too. I'd pay for a ticket on that boat, the Inland Texas Cruise. But it's interesting. I'm hearing 54 million, 15 million for archaeology over there, a bazillion million over here, and I'm and I'm sitting there talking to the folks at the Alamo, and that's 500 million there.
Yeah.
And I'm over there looking at our friends at Lobby and going, holy smoke, man, somehow the state of Texas needs to throw some love that direction as well. That's just some editorializing because I had the microphone. No other questions for our friends in Washington on the Brazos? All right, thank you. All right, the next order of business with all the invited testimony taken care of is we have a period for invited public testimony. I understand that we have a special guest today.
He's not going to be.
Not going to be
The
here.
one is Nick Lindley.
I don't know, Mr. Lindley was.
Yeah, he's ill.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience that would like to address the committee while we're here? All right. Please state your name for the record and tell us who you're with.
Blake Peffer, not with anybody, just a Houstonian who loves Texas. Couple things on my mind. 3 minutes is all I ask. First of all, thank you for what you're doing, what your mandate is. I knew the name until a chance meeting with Charles several months ago. Now I know much more about the 1836 project, and I applaud your efforts and the efforts of everybody here. Thank you. I'm here because quite a while ago, I started reading from my Texas History Library, which is 2,200 books, many of them first edition original printings. They date to 1833. And I started taking notes, and after months and months and compiling a tremendous amount of data from their diaries, from their speeches, from the Mexican diaries and records, et cetera, from these early books, it dawned on me that the story that was writing itself was the cost of freedom, how much they valued it. It's what brought them here. It's what made them fight the revolution as Mexican citizens first and then for independence. And it's what motivated their actions afterwards. My wife encouraged me to write a book. I have done so. And I am going to give everybody a copy of it. I don't pretend to teach anybody in here anything new, although there may be some interesting little facts that we found in some of the letters and speeches. But it is a tool, and I would ask you to read it. It's a short read. I went to public school. I can read it in 5 hours, and I'm a slow reader. It's very dense. It's 160 pages. I wrote it for the next generation who doesn't know anything about Texas history, little about Texas history, and nothing about cost of freedom. So in that light, it's a tool. I ask you to consider it. Amy is carrying it at San Jacinto. Charles has read it. Brian has read it. So at least somebody who knows what they're doing thinks a little bit about it. So thank you for your efforts and appreciate the time.
Thanks. Anybody have questions for Mr. Pepper? That's so am I hearing this correctly? We're about to get swag? All right. I like meetings like that.
Are you a member of the Sons of the Republic of Texas?
No, but I will be shortly, and
Good.
that's just tyranny of the urgent. I'm a descendant of Noah Smithwick and also
Oh.
others
I love Noah.
from, oh yeah, I mean,
He's great.
the book he wrote, the book he dictated to his daughter, Nana Donaldson, was just fabulous.
Are you from up around Marble Falls, your family, or?
No, Houston, we're farmers and ranchers in Waller County, just west of Houston.
Oh, yeah.
I own the southern 700 acres of Jared Gross's original plantation
Oh,
at the
okay.
confluence of John Irons, Jared Gross, who were both old 300, and Justo Liendo.
Yeah.
They all
Yes,
meet
yes, yes.
at one place.
Oh, man,
Are they
that's
ever going to do that reenactment again?
cool.
I
At
sure hope
Liendo?
so.
I sure hope so, because we had a good time there. We had fun.
That's an important piece of dirt. I'm glad
Yeah.
it's in good stewardship.
Thank
All right.
y'all.
Any other questions? Sherry, did you have
No.
anything?
As we finish up, I'd like to give everybody copies of our flyers because I'm coming your way with busload. Yes, we do have a party bus with a stripper pole
Huh.
and we do wine tours,
That's
but
now part of the
mostly,
public record, I'd like to point out.
right. Let's make history.
All right, so all we have left now after we heard about the party bus, is we have closing remarks and adjournment. So my only closing remarks are we're going to reconvene in January in Austin. So it'll be a local call for a bunch of folks. And we're going to address some of the issues that we brought up at the very beginning of the meeting. One thing that has been kind of my takeaway from this meeting is we've got a great story that's being told out at our Texas Historical Commission sites at the George Ranch up in Nacogdoches, all over the place. And I think the imperative to get everything coordinated and to get everybody talking to each other and in the same room, the fact that the talent that's been in this room has been in this room and very patient all the way through a very long meeting is remarkable to me. So I commend y'all for your great efforts out in the field. And if there's anything that we can do to amplify what you're doing, that's our function. We're here to support the efforts to the benefit of the public of Texas, the people of Texas, in telling the Texas story. So that's what we're here to do. If we can help you, do not hesitate to ask. And thank y'all for helping us. All right, with that, any other remarks?
Just thanks to everybody.
Oh, Sherry?
Am I interrupting someone? I'm sorry.
Nope, you're up.
I just wanted to say, again, acknowledging as you did, Chairman, the importance of the legislative commitment to historic restoration and telling the story of Texas. These dollars are big dollars. I want to laud my former boss, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who's taken the charge on a lot of this. Certainly Senator Lois Kolkhorst at Washington on the Brazos. But what this means to me is the people of Texas are committed to preserving our history. There's not been any blowback on this, and this is a lot of money. So I'm glad to see where a lot of it is going. I watched all these proposals come in, and these things can just drift away, as we have seen. People can lose their past, they lose their perspective. So it's good we're making this investment in the future and in our story.
Only took us 200 years to get here, Sherry. So, but these are eye-watering numbers that I'm hearing, and I'm amazed and heartily encouraged. We've got one more presentation or
Closing remark.
closing remark.
I would like to thank the folks from SHSU Online for making this process work.
Here, here.
They did a great job. Thanks, guys. Yes, sir.
Doing the tour, you mentioned the letter between Houston and Travis, where Houston told him, go burn it down. Bowie, go burn it down. If it's okay with them. Did he say who them were?
The Texas government.
He said government. The word he used was government or the president.
Yeah, he's referring to the Texas government. If it meets with he's writing a note to His Excellency at the time. He said, if it meets with your approval, I'd want him to burn it down.
This letter was from Houston to Bowie.
No, he talked about Bowie in the letter.
Okay.
And it was from Houston to the chief executive at that time. Yeah, it was Burnett.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for hosting us here. I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. All done. We're done.
We can spread the money around.
Bye, everybody.
Except for Lava Head.